We're here tonight to receive presentations from some very able and very well-read and learned folks, both on our staff and in our legal team, about acquiring a water company. And the reason we're here is because of so much concern raised by our community over the last few years concerning water rates and the continual increases of those water rates and the future sale of the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company and its sister companies to a foreign concern. Tonight we will be receiving presentations from our town attorney, Mr. John Brown and his team, and from the town staff, our assistant town managers, Mark Puckett and Mr. Dennis Cron. So at this time, I would like to turn this over to our town attorney, Mr. John Brown.
Thank you, Frank, and my welcome to all of you this evening. My condolences, perhaps, because you have to hear from so many lawyers and town officials tonight, but we really tried to put together a very comprehensive presentation for this town hall meeting, focusing our efforts on trying to put as many issues in front of you, both from a legal and a public policy standpoint, as they relate to this continuing issue of the ratepayers, Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, and related issues. I don't think it would be a surprise to any of you that in the time that I have been the town attorney, I have had the members of the current town council, as well as prior town councils, call to my attention a variety of concerns regarding the private investor-owned water company that presently provides water service to a substantial number of you in the audience this evening. For many years now, ratepayers have expressed concerns to the town council about rising water rates, and more importantly, about the process by which those rates are raised through the California Public Utilities Commission in San Francisco. We'll be talking a lot more about that as we go on. The town has, in recent years, allocated and devoted substantially more resources to sending lawyers and other experts to San Francisco to engage with Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company as it returns approximately every 3 years to seek rate increases from the California Public Utilities Commission. Many of you are familiar with the stories about those rate increase applications. We recently had an administrative law judge from the California Public Utilities Commission come to our town to hear your testimony about the latest series of proposed increases, which are proposed now to go into effect for the years 2015, 2016, and 2017. We'll be talking in much more detail about our efforts on behalf of the town in front of the California Public Utilities Commission, but we'll also be presenting slides this evening as to the current status of the rate increases that have been applied for and what you all as ratepayers can reasonably probably expect over the next 3 years, given the current status of the California Public Utilities rate increase proceeding. We're also going to touch on another proposed proceeding before the California Public Utilities Commission, which is the proposed acquisition of Yermo Water Company by the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. The town has achieved some not insubstantial legal victories with respect to the CPUC proceedings. We'll be providing much more detail about that. I think it's important that as a result of the town's active and ongoing intervention, and in fact, we've been at the table now very actively for the past year, a substantial portion of the resources that you read about being allocated to the oversight of the rate-making procedures in front of the California Public Utilities Commission comes from having members of the town attorney staff and other experts go up to San Francisco and prepare data requests, provide testimony with respect to the proposed increases. And finally, I'd like to allude to the fact that in my very short tenure as your town attorney, there has been one actual change in ownership of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company due to its acquisition by Carlyle Group in Washington, D.C. And we are now confronting yet a short 3 years later, another proposed acquisition of the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. In both instances, transfers that would find the owners not remaining in Washington, D.C., as is the current ownership structure, but instead moving to a Canadian company in Canada, and I will refer to that in more detail as I go on. My next slide is intended to not depress you all, but to remind you very briefly of the water bill increases that have accrued to an average residential bill between 2002 and projecting that figure into 2015. I know there are many in the audience that would contend that that red line's not going in the right direction. I'm not going to editorialize as your town attorney, but simply go on to provide some additional overview with respect to rate increases and rate comparisons. At my age, having practiced law for 40 years, I was hoping they could enlarge this type a little bit so I didn't have to wear my glasses. I'm going to summarize this chart. This is a complicated chart which is intended to show that there are two private companies, Apple Valley Ranchos and Golden State Water Company, which principally provide water service in the region, and approximately 4 municipally operated or government-owned water systems. And the chart, I think, illustrates, and hopefully you can see that a little bit better from our handouts, that the rates for the two private water companies, including Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, are 2, 3, and in some cases 4 times the rates charged by those municipally owned water systems in the area. I know many of you have friends and relatives that receive water from those other municipalities, so you're probably well aware of having swapped tales about your water bill in comparison to theirs. Now let me talk very quickly about the topics that I'd like to cover. Having talked about the introduction in terms of the concerns of the Town Council, I'd like to turn and address essentially several different topics. My first topics will include the additional background to all of you regarding the history, ownership, and status of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company as an investor-owned private utility. I'm going to provide you a CPUC update. We're also going to be joined by my colleagues from the Town Attorney's Office to talk to you in much more detail about the status of the current rate case and the proposed acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company by Algonquin Water Company. My partner and colleague in the Town Attorney's Office, Kendall McVeigh, at the end, to my right, is going to be talking to you in depth about the legalities of acquiring a private investor-owned water company in the state of California, including condemnation. And finally, my colleague, Alicia Wintersweck, who is an environmental lawyer, is going to be briefing you on the environmental assessment of this particular project should the Town Council elect at a future date to proceed with the acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. Finally, we're going to be joined by 2 assistant town managers to talk about operational review. How would the town operate the system? Financial review. How would the town pay for the system? What impact would the purchase have on rates? And a summary of pros and cons, and finally recommendations that we're prepared to make as both town staff and town attorneys to the Town Council this evening. But let me proceed, if I can, with the background on Antelope Valley Ranchos Water Company. Apple Valley, excuse me. Of course, I think many of the people in this room have a deep appreciation for local history of our town. And I think it's well known to you that Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company had very humble beginnings when Newton T. Bass and Bud Westland formed a very small water company in 1945. I know there's some folks in the audience now that remember what the area looked like in 1945. Newton Bass and Mr. Westland are considered the modern founders of the town of Apple Valley. And since then, Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company has played a prominent and appreciated role in our town. I am reminded of that fact all of the time, not only by the town council, who are my bosses, but also by many of you in the audience. The ownership of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of Park Water Company, which is owned by the Carlyle Group in Washington, D.C. The Carlyle Group is a multinational global asset management firm with investors all over the world. As you might imagine, in these troubled times worldwide, there is a particular appreciation for the ability of an investor in the Middle East or China or South America to invest in the ownership of a regulated private water company in Apple Valley, California. The Carlyle Group also provides water services in Los Angeles through Park Water Company and in Missoula, Montana through Mountain Water Company. I think it's no secret to anybody in this room that the city of Missoula, Montana is in the process of attempting to acquire Mountain Water Company through condemnation. Many of you were perhaps able in recent weeks to listen to portions of that trial. I wasn't able to listen to it as much as I would have liked, but I found the testimony to be very fascinating. I had some wag in the audience tell me earlier this evening that if Missoula, Montana folks can acquire their water system, so can the town of Apple Valley. How are the Carlyle Group's investors doing today? Since May 2012, the share price increases in the Carlyle Group have increased from $21.31 to around $29.82 per share. Each of the marks at the bottom of this graph indicate a dividend payment per share ranging from 11 cents in August of 2012 to $1.61 in February of 2015. My next slide is intended just to briefly address the income of the Carlyle Group. I don't diminish its tremendous achievements as a private equity asset management firm. It's one of the most successful in the world. In 2012, as you can see, it had an economic net income of $736 million. In 2014, the CEO of Carlyle Group indicated that this was our best year as a public company, with distributable income of $973 million, which was 16% higher than 2013. The firm assets include $188 billion in 2013 and $194 billion in 2014. In California, Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, although owned by the Carlyle Group, is organized and operated as an investor-owned regulated company, regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. That is governed by the 5-member California Public Utilities Commission in San Francisco, as I noted earlier, and as a regulated water utility, Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company has a government-protected private monopoly. That is the system by which regulated private utilities in California are organized and operated pursuant to the jurisdiction of the California Public Utilities Commission. And I also know that it's known to many of you in the audience that we have been reminded on more than one occasion as the town of Apple Valley that the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company recognizes and appreciates its monopoly and has no interest in the town or anyone else providing water or reclaimed water within the town of Apple Valley. I think the map of the service area goes without speaking and is well known to most of you in the audience. This slide is intended to summarize that Apple Valley water system presently consists of 20,000 connections. It serves roughly 65,000 people within a 50-mile square service area. And I've described the facilities as at the bottom there as best I could by extracting them from documents previously filed with the California Public Utilities Commission. I have to tell you at this point that the precise location of the systems making up the Apple Valley Ranchos water system are generally a closely guarded proprietary secret. We have great difficulty as a public agency accessing that information. And now that we have been characterized by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company as a market competitor, it has become even more difficult for us to obtain additional information on that system. Wanted to update you briefly on Missoula's condemnation. Mountain Water Company is a sister company of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, and it supplies the water to the town of Missoula, Montana. High rates and decaying infrastructure, publicly reported over and over again in Missoula, prompted Missoula to look into acquisition over the last 2 to 3 years. Missoula tried to negotiate the purchase of Mountain Water Company, and at one point secured an offer of the Carlisle Group to sell Mountain Water Company to Missoula, Montana, if a decision was ever made to sell Mountain Water Company. Something was lost in the translation there, and when the managing director of Carlisle Infrastructure was informed that would result in the loss of approximately $2 million a year in ratepayer money to Park Water Company in Los Angeles, that negotiation was terminated. The Carlisle Group has refused to sell Mountain Water Company to Missoula. In April of 2014, Missoula filed for condemnation under Montana law, and the town staff was last year deposed in that particular lawsuit, and one of our town employees did in fact provide some very brief testimony at the trial with respect to the provision of reclaimed water here in the town of Apple Valley. Where does that leave us at the present time? I want to briefly touch upon the town of Apple Valley's efforts to purchase the system. Over the last 3 years, the town has consistently indicated its desire to purchase the system from Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company through a negotiated purchase process. That is the preferred method of acquisition. The owners of Apple Valley Ranchos have refused to entertain offers or to enter into negotiations to sell to the town, and despite our best efforts, we were unable to persuade the Carlisle Group's investment banker to put us on the list of those entities permitted to bid on the system when it was recently put up for sale and is now proposed to be purchased, as you know, by Algonquin Liberty. Having given that overview, I think I'd now like to provide the CPUC update. This is fairly dense material, but it's indicative of the rate-making process here in California today. And my colleague and town attorney, Jason Ackerman, will now provide the latest update on what's pending before the California Public Utilities Commission with respect to Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you about the status of the CPUC cases. This evening, I'm going to talk to you about 3 separate proceedings at the California Public Utilities Commission. The first is going to be related to the currently pending Apple Valley Ranchos general rate case. When I discuss that general rate case, I will provide you with some historical perspective on rate applications filed by Apple Valley Ranchos. The second item I'm going to talk to you about is the Yermo acquisition, and the third item is the Algonquin merger proceeding that we are also participating in. And so, as you're likely aware, Apple Valley Ranchos is a Class A water utility that is regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. It is obligated as a Class A utility to file general rate case applications with the Commission every 3 years for 3-year rate cycles. And those applications identify the various expenditures that the company is going to undertake over those next 3 years and the associated rate increase with those expenditures. So I'll direct your attention to this slide that's being currently projected to show you where what Apple Valley has requested in its applications in 2002, 2005, 2008, and 2011. The way these rate increases are identified is typically in the first year it's the largest rate increase, and then in subsequent years smaller incremental increases are added on top of that larger increase. So if you compound these numbers, what we're looking at in these various applications is requests anywhere from, say, 20% to 35% over that 3-year rate cycle. Now, as you all know, this far exceeds the rates of inflation, probably wage growth and everything else. But this is the amount that has been requested in these applications. Next slide, please. Okay, so how much has in looking and reviewing these applications, how much has the commission authorized? This slide shows what the commission has authorized in these rate proceedings. And so you'll see that what has been authorized, the low year was the application of 2005, where there was a 13.1% increase. The high year in this sample is 2002, where there was almost a 25% rate increase. These rate increases were taken from the final decisions that were issued on the rate case applications and the tariff sheets that are attached to the back of those decisions. And that's how we came up with these numbers. But what is important is this analysis is based on the use of 200 cubic feet of water annually. And that's not an arbitrary number. That is the average residential usage in Apple Valley Ranchos service area currently. And so that's why that number was selected, to identify what the rate increases have been over these rate cycles. Now, it's important to note that these increases don't include surcharges for the water revenue adjustment mechanism, for the low income assistance programs, for the various balancing accounts and other surcharges. I was presented with a number of Apple Valley Ranchos bills in advance of this meeting. And I looked at the bills, and each of the surcharges is identified by an alphanumeric number. So, for example, there's 170-W surcharge 173-W-A. These are various surcharges that are authorized pursuant to what's called advice letter treatment. That is, letters sent to the commission for approval outside of the rate the general rate case, where the commission approves or disapproves the surcharges. Now, if you have 5, 6, 7, 8 of them on your bill, that's because the commission approved 5, 6, or 8 surcharges through advice letter treatment. And in looking at this very small sample of bills, those surcharges total approximately 10% of your bill. So, next slide, please. What does that mean in terms of bill impacts? This slide shows you what the average monthly bill or bi-monthly bill was in 2002, $81.12, relatively reasonable, right? In 2013, that jumped to $136.41. So as you can see, these repeated requests for rate increases are always high. They come in low, but they always end up being pretty significant, especially when you're adding surcharges on top of the authorizations. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now we're talking about the current pending general rate case application. This was filed in 2014, January 2014. And in the application, Apple Valley Ranchos requested approximately 15% rate increase, a 15% rate increase for 2015, approximately 8.5% in 2016, and 8.19% in 2017. You total this up over the rate cycle, giving the compounding factor, just backing out surcharges, it's approximately 35% over this next rate case. And so the town was very concerned with what was being requested in this application and asked me to participate in the general rate case proceeding to see what we could do to protect the interest of ratepayers in Apple Valley Ranchos service area. We participated in the case. We had to fly to San Francisco, participate in pre-hearing conferences, come back, propound what are called data requests, asking for documentation related to the application and evaluate the reasonableness of the requests and the necessity of the requests. We participated in settlement meetings with town staff, and in doing that, we achieved some very good results. Through the settlement process, there were approximately $8.5 million of capital improvement projects that were backed out of the request, backed out of the application. And we were able to secure, I think, through a proposed decision, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, we were able to negotiate for a flat pay program for folks that to assist with budgeting, so that you wouldn't have these sort of spikes in your utility costs. You could participate in a flat rate program. The proposed decision for this general rate case application was released earlier this month. And in the decision, the administrative law judge approved an 11.56% revenue increase or rate increase. What does this mean to residential ratepayers? Well, instead of facing that 15 or 16% rate increase during the first year, that was reduced to 10%. Still substantial, but significantly less than what was being requested by the utility. Interestingly, in the proposed decision, the administrative law judge keyed into an important theme in our arguments to the commission. That is, ratepayers need relief. They need help. I mean, we walked through exactly what those rate increases have been over the years, and we wanted to point that out to our administrative law judge. Now, the Office of Ratepayer Advocates, who is supposed to advocate on behalf of ratepayers, entered into a settlement agreement with the utility on capital improvement projects, the main replacement project. You see, the utility had requested $16 million in main replacements. The Office of Ratepayer Advocates and the utility agreed to $15 million in main replacements over the next rate cycle. Our administrative law judge keyed into our concerns about ratepayers. And what she did in the proposed decision is she slashed main replacements by about $7.5 million, down to $8.5 million. This is a tremendous benefit to ratepayers because it takes those capital improvements out of rate base. You're not paying the mandatory approximately 10% rate of return or profit to the utility on that infrastructure. So it's a tremendous benefit. But I told you this is a proposed decision. And the utility is commented on the proposed decision, saying that the various components of the settlement agreement were based on having that $15 million included in the other part of the settlement agreement, right? Because if it didn't get the $15 million, it wouldn't have agreed to other terms of the settlement. Our administrative law judge said if that is the case and the utility is not going to accept the settlement agreement as modified by the ALJ, then we would have to go to hearings on what would be appropriate in terms of main replacement. Is it going to be 0? Is it going to be 7 million? Is it going to be 15 million? We're going to have a hearing on that issue because thus far the utility has not indicated that it would accept the settlement agreement as proposed. Those hearings are scheduled to take place in San Francisco starting on Monday, May 11th. Next slide, please. I guess this is one more thing that I did want to talk about in this presentation, and that is the 2015 mandatory water reductions. I'm sure you're all aware of the Executive Order B-29-15. This is Governor Brown's order to reduce urban water usage by 25% throughout the state of California. This mandate is imposed through the State Water Resources Control Board on municipally owned water utilities. For some state constitutional reasons, the governor did not mandate that on CPUC regulated utilities, but informed and recommended to the Public Utilities Commission that it institute mandatory reductions as well. And I suspect that I believe that the commission will take that recommendation seriously and evaluate the issue. But I think the point here is that, well, what can you expect from that if these mandates are imposed? Apple Valley Rancho service area is in the 35% reduction slot. So if that state mandate applies to water use in the Apple Valley Ranchos service area, you will be required to reduce by February 2016 your usage by 35%. That's going from that 200 CCSF, 100 cubic feet, to about 130.
Jason, I think you're referring to 35 because we learned earlier today that 36% projected on the slide, ladies and gentlemen, is in flux. As you might imagine, our good governor has gotten a tremendous amount of feedback, negative feedback, about these kinds of cuts, particularly in places of the world like our town. But I believe, Jason, it's currently 36% is the proposed cut.
That's right, John. And thank you very much for that clarification. There has been a lot of pushback on the executive order, and I suspect that the reduction amounts will be reduced, but they will still, I think, be quite significant. And so what does that mean in the context of the regulated utilities and regulated ratepayers? Well, as most of you know, the California Public Utilities Commission in 2008 adopted the Water Revenue Adjustment Mechanism, which essentially decouples revenue from sales. And that was to provide some incentive to the utilities to engage in conservation efforts to reduce water usage, but at the same time allowing them to recover revenue that would be associated with that saved water, so that there was no sort of disincentive, so that utilities did not have the incentive to sell water so that they could get revenue.
I can tell you that generally speaking, when the town manager, his staff, and my office saw the 36% cut in water usage for the town of Apple Valley, knowing what we know about the sacrifices and cutbacks in water consumption, we could not comprehend how we could be on the same list as Beverly Hills and Newport Beach. Therefore, we are in the process of trying to analyze as carefully as we can the numbers that the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company has presented over the last year or two to the State Water Resources Control Board and the Department of Health to better understand why we're in the 36% bracket. And as I understand it, Park Water Company users, 20,000 or so of them in South Central Los Angeles, are in the 2% bracket. It's just something we're trying to understand and better communicate to you how it is we ended up in the twilight zone. You want to talk a little bit about the Algonquin takeover so people are better informed about that, Jason?
Yes, please. We'll move on to the next slide. Before I talk about Algonquin, I'd like to talk about the Yermo acquisition. Apple Valley Ranchos, through the advice letter process, made an offer to acquire the Yermo system. The Yermo system is about 55 miles east of the town of Apple Valley, and it has been in a complete state of disrepair. It was taken into, there was a receivership proceeding at the Public Utilities Commission some time ago. But Apple Valley Ranchos had made an offer to acquire that system, indicating that approximately $750,000 would be needed for immediate emergency repairs within the system. And then the company had anticipated that there would be additional cost associated eventually with the acquisition that would require an investment of about $7.7 million to meet health and safety codes. There are only 250 connections, approximately 250 connections in Yermo. And if a $7.7 million investment was to be recovered through those connections. It would be probably, or approximately $31,000 per existing connection. That's not going to happen. Those costs are going to be spread amongst the ratepayers in the existing Apple Valley Ranchos service area. Next slide, please.
Jason, I just wanted to mention on Yermo that our friends and neighbors in Yermo are now part of the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company family and would have to be dealt with, whether by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company and its new Canadian owner, or by the town of Apple Valley, and that's something that we're prepared to address at a future date.
And just one last point on Yermo. There's the CPUC approved AVR's acquisition of Yermo. There is currently a receivership proceeding pending in San Bernardino Superior Court that needs to be completed before that transaction is itself completed. And so finally, I'd like to talk to you about the Algonquin takeover. Algonquin is a Canadian company with utility investments throughout North America. Most of their utility investments are in the area of electric utilities. And a very small portion of their holdings is in the area of water service. As you're likely aware, Carlisle paid approximately $102 million in cash for the Park water system, which includes Park, Apple Valley Ranchos, and the asset in Missoula, Montana in 2011, just 4 years ago. In addition to the cash payment, there was also an acquisition, or they acquired some debt associated with the assets. But in 2014, Carlisle was looking to sell the Park assets and put it on the market and accepted an offer from Algonquin. Algonquin's offer is $250 million in cash, and it's assuming an additional $75 million in debt. We are, because it is a merger of a regulated utility, the CPUC does have jurisdiction to approve that merger application. We are participating in that proceeding as well. You know, our concern is, in light of Algonquin paying more than double what Carlisle paid for the asset, we're wondering how that transaction can be completed without, you know, direct impact to ratepayers. So we're involved in the proceeding to look out for ratepayer interests, and we will continue to be involved in that proceeding for probably the next couple months.
Thank you very much for Jason. Now the exciting part of our program, Mayor and members of the Town Council. My colleague, Ken McVeigh in the Town Attorney's Office, is prepared at this point to brief both the Town Council and the members of the audience on the acquisition proceeding as it is currently governed by California law. We are pleased and proud to be invited by the Town Council to make this presentation openly and transparently. I want to acknowledge that the very fine eminent domain lawyer for Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company is in the audience tonight, and I challenge him to invite his client to make the same presentation to us at some point. But having said that, Kendall McVeigh is now prepared to brief you on the acquisition benefits and the process under California law.
Good afternoon, or good evening, rather. After hearing Jason talk about how the PUC process works and all the rate increases that have occurred, there have been a number of comments from the community about, is there an alternative? And that is looking at the possibility of having the town run the system. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of having a town ownership of the water system. First of all, the vast majority of water systems in California and throughout the country are owned by municipal operators. About 80 to 85% of such operations are run by municipal operators. Now, what are some of the reasons for that, where there will be municipal ownership? Well, one of the factors here, as indicated in the slide, is that such ownership is people-driven, not profit-driven. And what that means is that the focus is to provide service to the community and not to make profit. In other words, as an investor-owned utility, regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, these utilities are given a rate of return that is set by the utility and by the California Public Utilities Commission. As Jason indicated, it may be as much as almost as close to 10% on what is called rate base. That wouldn't be the case with a system that's operated by the town. Also, an investor-owned utility has to pay taxes. That's not the case when it's would be owned by the town. Also, under the current system with the PUC, there is what is called the Water Revenue Adjustment Mechanism that Jason talked about. That is where, basically, this is a system that started in 2008 with the California Public Utilities Commission, that if the utility doesn't sell as much water as projected, it gets to charge higher rates. It's a surcharge imposed basically on your bill, which means that the less they sell, the more they can make in terms of on a per unit basis. What happened is this started in 2008, and guess what happened in 2008? We had the big recession then, and demand goes down, and the risk of having the demand go down was shifted for the first time to ratepayers, so that on a per unit basis, you actually paid a little bit more. That wouldn't necessarily happen here if there is a town ownership, because the RAM system is a CPUC system. In addition, there is no profit incentive for, as opposed to when you have an investor-owned system. Basically, the incentive is to provide service to the public. Now, one other important issue that has come up, taking a look at the next slide here, is local accountability and transparency. The decisions that would be made if there is town ownership would be local. Now, the way the CPUC works is that it's run by 5 commissioners. All the decisions, the important decisions that are made in San Francisco. If you're going to participate in the decision-making process, you got to get over there. You got to get up to San Francisco. Jason has done that, as he talked about. It's very hard for the community itself to go and participate in those hearings up in San Francisco. In addition, of course, the decisions are made by the investor-owned utility. In this case, we are talking about the Carlyle Group, which has its offices in Washington, D.C. It's possible that it will be taken, the water system will be taken over by a Canadian company. Again, not in the decision makers are not here. They will be, in any case, hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. In addition to that is the fact that as an investor-owned utility, the utility is not subject to certain requirements. Like we're here meeting today pursuant to the Brown Act. We have to meet certain requirements as a town in order to comply with the Act. If somebody wants to make a request for information, they can make a request under the Public Records Act. Those provisions don't apply to an investor-owned utility. And so if the town did operate the system, it would be subject to that public transparency. In addition, the town, if it did become the owner of the system, it would have its rates subject to the Proposition 218 process, which means that the rates have to be based on actual costs. They cannot be, there cannot be a cushion in there for profit. There can't be a cushion in there to transfer the money in order to increase the general fund. It has to be essentially based upon the actual costs, where also the rate-making process is subject to a protest and a public review process by the voters in the community. Let's look at the next slide. One other consideration that has come up in the discussion is that the town would be in a position, because it is involved with its wastewater operations and also as a member of the Victor Valley Water Reclamation Authority, would be able to work in conjunction with the authority to have the economies of scale to make sure that recycled water is put to ample and proper use. One of the issues that has come up is that Apple Valley Ranchos has indicated that, in fact, if the town does decide to take try to take recycled water in order to provide service to the community, that Apple Valley Ranchos, under a provision under the Public Utilities Code, would seek to sue the town and seek damages for doing that. that issue would go away if the town does in fact decide and does proceed with acquisition of the system. And finally, I think it's important to look at the factors of what the actual regulatory process means under the current system with the CPUC. One of the things that is not really fully appreciated is that the way it works is that the investor-owned utility makes its money by investing in projects and getting a set rate of return up to 10%, almost 10% currently. And what that means is the more it puts, the more it invests, whether or not it's the best investment, the more money it makes. The other interesting way the costs work with the current system is that basically the costs of that are incurred by the utility are almost automatically passed on in rates. So what does that do to the incentive structure? That means then that being efficient, looking out for the best deal, looking out for the best bargain is not necessarily incentivized in the same way that it would be either in the private sector or under municipal ownership. In the private sector, I mean in the regular business world, not in the PUC world. And finally, there is this issue that's been coming really up to the forefront in the newspaper media and television, having to do with the accountability of the California Public Utilities Commission itself. There have been a number of issues that have come up as far as the kind of communications that occur between the commissioners and the industry that they're supposed to regulate. To the point, for example, that there have been exposés of the kind of communications that have occurred between the former president of the California Public Utilities Commission and Pacific Gas and Electric, where basically staff and the president of the commission was giving direction to PG&E what to do, how to respond, how to kind of contain the public outcry regarding the San Bruno explosion that occurred a couple of years ago. This issue of having industry capture, in effect, is an issue that would be avoided if there's town ownership. There would also be one of the issues that is also of concern here is what is called rate design, which has to do with how rates are tiered, to what extent certain customer classes are going to pay certain rates. That would be something that within constitutional limits would be subject to local control. Now, looking at the next slide, in terms of the question of whether there have been any other local governments that have looked at the issue of taking over their water systems, it has occurred and is occurring right now. Recently, Ojai, through the Casitas Municipal Water District, proceeded with a vote in its community as to whether to finance the potential acquisition of the water system that was investor-owned and regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission. And by an 87% vote approval, it was approved to proceed with such financing for the acquisition of the system. The private utility, regulated by the CPUC, challenged that vote in a trial court, lost, appealed, went to the Court of Appeal, and the decision came down just 2 weeks ago from the Court of Appeal, affirming that the vote was sound, was legal, and should not be set aside. The opinion starts, it starts, and I'm looking at the second bullet here, it says that the community was concerned about what the decision calls sky-high water bills. And it said that the local water district, quote, had concluded that the Ojai community would benefit from having its water utility run by a locally controlled entity rather than an out-of-area corporation seeking to maximize profits for its owners. The court finally concluded, this is taken again verbatim from its decision in the very last paragraph of its decision, in ruling in favor of the public entity, it said that the private utility advocated, quote, for a rule that would shift the bargaining power decisively in its favor, allowing it to hold out for a sale price far above the market rate while it continues to extract monopoly rents from the people of Ojai. This is neither sound policy nor supportable by the statutory text. Like the trial court, we will not set the will of the voters aside. Now, look, there has to be also a look at the other side of it, because proceeding with possible acquisition of the water system has its uncertainties, it has its risks. This includes the fact that, of course, this could be a costly venture. The fact is that going through the process of acquisition, whether it's by negotiation or by the condemnation process, can be expensive. And most importantly, no one at this point knows what the system is actually going to cost. The cost of the system is unknown because it's either subject of negotiation or subject of litigation. In addition, there are other issues that have to be addressed and considered. For example, personnel will have to be acquired and retained in order to run the system, and that has to be analyzed, what kind of expenses will be involved in that. And also in terms of the condition of the system, unfortunately, we don't have X-ray vision, so we can't look at the pipes through the streets. We don't know of the full condition of the system and what condition it is, and that is, again, an uncertainty and a risk that has to be considered. Another big uncertainty is one that has already been talked about, which is the uncertain. Let's go to the big uncertainty slide here, which says that there is an uncertain future for water in California. We've discussed the fact that the governor has declared an emergency drought condition, that for the first time in California's history, there's been an emergency declaration on a statewide basis of water rationing. Right now, the Apple Valley Ranchos area is subject to the highest bracket of water reduction. Again, those consequences have to be assessed and see what possible implications it has for acquisition. Now, in order to proceed with potential acquisition, there has to be a process under the government code that has to be followed. And in essence, what has been done and has been done by the town is to retain a qualified valuation expert to appraise or come up with a valuation of the system. That person has been retained. That person has inspected the system. Appropriate notices of a decision to appraise were sent out. The appraiser has, or the business valuation expert, who is an expert on utility system valuations, has looked at the fair market value of the system as a whole. What that means is the appraiser or the business valuation expert is looking at the system, including all of its holdings, as a business. What kind of value would this business operation fetch, using the concept of fair market value? The appraiser, looking at the process number 3, looked at different approaches and coming to those conclusions as to valuation, looking at the income approach, the cost approach, the market approach. I'm not going to go into the details of these approaches because there's been a prior presentation about this last month. But the bottom line conclusion of this analysis by the appraiser or business valuation expert for utility systems is looking at different approaches and focusing on the income approach, arrived at a preliminary conclusion of $50.6 million and had an additional discount due to market conditions, arriving at a valuation conclusion of $45.54 million. Now, what do we do with this conclusion at this point? At this point, the town has, as already been discussed, informally attempted to discuss with the Carlisle Group the possibility of acquiring the system. Those discussions have not gone very far. And at some point, if there is going to be any effort to acquire the system, a formal offer will have to be made under the government code for the fair market value of the system as determined by an approved valuation. That does not mean there has been a decision to condemn the system. And all it means is that there is a process by which there can be an opportunity to negotiate, to discuss possible acquisition on a voluntary basis, and that can be done after a formal offer is made. The ultimate decision to condemn can only be made at a notice hearing on a resolution of necessity, which will give the opportunity for the property owner to come forward and speak and be heard. So basically, looking at the acquisition process that remains, if the town does decide to proceed further, the appraisal has to be finalized. There has to be a formal approval of the final appraisal. There has to be an offer made based upon the fair market value. There has to be appropriate environmental documentation. And if there is a resolution of necessity hearing where it's decided to proceed with condemnation, then there would be an eminent domain action filed in San Bernardino County Superior Court, where the issue of the right to proceed with acquisition by eminent domain would be addressed by a trial court judge, and where the issue of valuation ultimately would be determined by a jury. And at that point, through that process, up to that process or even before, it is possible for the town to have possession of the system and start running the system.
Thank you, Ken. There's one last important legal piece that we want to brief you on before we get to the Assistant Town Manager's presentations, and that has to do with the issue of environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. It's something that is of particular concern when there is a proposal to undertake a project of this size, the project being the acquisition of the local water system. I want to remind everyone that we take this obligation very seriously. The California Public Utilities Commission did not elect to do any environmental assessment whatsoever of the acquisition of the Yermo Water Company. And that is not the town's approach, as our colleague from the town attorney's office, Alicia Winterswijk, will brief you on right now.
Thank you, John, and thank you all for having me here tonight. As John mentioned, I am going to give you a very broad overview of the environmental review process for the potential acquisition of the Apple Valley Ranchos water system. So as many of you are probably aware, anytime a public agency in California entertains a discretionary action that may have a potential impact, physical impact on the environment, either directly or indirectly, then that public agency must first, before taking an action in furtherance of the project, evaluate the environmental consequences of the decision. So here, the town of Apple Valley would have the obligation to evaluate the environmental consequences of the potential acquisition of the Apple Valley Ranchos water system. That water system would include the infrastructure, the real property, and the water supply of the system. At this particular time, the town does not have plans to increase the size of the system, to change operations of the system, or to make any physical improvements to the system. So the project description in any environmental review would be tailored accordingly. So moving back one slide, with respect to environmental review, we expect that an environmental impact report would be prepared for the proposed project. An environmental impact report is the most comprehensive type of report that is prepared under the California Environmental Quality Act. It is a report that looks at not only the environmental consequences of the proposed project, but also the environmental consequences of alternatives to the project, including the no project alternative, which would mean, in this case, no acquisition of the system. The environmental impact report will also look at potential cumulative impacts of the project, growth-inducing impacts of the project, and irreversible or irretrievable impacts, environmental impacts of the proposed project. As a note, it is important to keep in mind that the California Environmental Quality Act is a disclosure statute, which means that the report that is prepared is intended to inform the council when they go to make their decision on the potential acquisition. It is not intended to stop a project or to prohibit development in any way. The next slide gives you a very high-level bird's eye view overview of the CEQA review process and the steps that are involved. So I won't read each of these steps to you, but as you go through the list, you will see that there are several opportunities for the public to engage in the process. And I will point those out because I think that those will be important avenues for you all to use when you're reviewing the documentation to express your concerns either about the scope of the document or about the analysis contained in the document. So the first place in which the public would be engaged is at the 5th bullet point where you see circulate the initial study and the notice of preparation. That particular task is a task where we go through all of the list of factors that are required under the Act that we evaluate, and we tell you what we think the potentially significant effects of the project would be. You have an opportunity to look at that report and then either agree or disagree with the conclusions that are reached, and to provide comments to the town and the town staff on the scope of review. When we receive comments on the notice of preparation, we take them seriously. They are made a part of the draft environmental impact report, which you will see appear a couple steps later in this bullet point list. And we respond to all those comments in another document that we call the draft environmental impact report. That report will be circulated for public review. Again, you all will have an opportunity to review that document and to submit comments. The town has an obligation to respond in writing to all comments that are submitted during the public comment period on the environmental impact report. We will do that. And in so doing, we'll prepare what is called a final environmental impact report, which you will see again a couple of bullet points later in this list. That final environmental impact report will also be available 10 days before any decision is made on the potential acquisition, if it occurs, for the Apple Valley Ranchos water system. Next slide, please. This slide gives you a very conservative estimate of what it would take to complete the environmental review process. I've indicated on this slide that it could take anywhere from 8 to 12 months to prepare and complete the environmental impact report process. That process can occur much more quickly. The process all depends on the amount of input we get from stakeholders, from the residents of the town of Apple Valley, from public agencies, and from state agencies. Given my understanding of the town citizens' interest in this particular project, as well as the town council's interest in this project, I think that the heightened level of interest will certainly help us to keep things moving quickly, and will hopefully keep us in the earlier or the shorter estimate of time for preparation of the environmental impact report. I've again summarized at the end of this slide key dates for public input for your reference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alicia. Council, we would like to now address two questions that you've asked us to entertain. One being, can and does the town have the capacity to operate this system, should it be acquired? And secondly, can and does the town have the capacity to pay for a system, should it be acquired? We'll begin with the operations overview, and I'll ask Dennis Cron at this time to address this issue.
Thank you, Frank. First, I'd like to thank the audience for taking their time to come here and listen to all of this discussion. It's critically important to this decision. As Mr. McVeigh indicated previously, in California, the overwhelming majority of water purveyors are publicly owned utilities, owned by the members, the taxpayers. Private ownership of water systems is, in fact, the exception and not the rule. And as Ken said, 80% of water systems in the state and across this country are actually publicly owned systems and not public utility owned purveyors. The town can run the system. Town staff, with help can run the water system of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. Town has a finance department that has an accounting system that bills residents for wastewater, trash, business licensing, animal licensing, and so on. The town has an effective customer service team. I think actually our customer service in the town of Apple Valley is nearly unmatched. The town has a public works department, handles street maintenance, wastewater maintenance, landscape maintenance, grounds maintenance, and all of the typical public works tasks that would be performed in any other city. A number of the town's current public works employees have spent at least part of their working career in the water industry, and I myself have been in the water industry first beginning full-time employment 40 years ago in 1975. So I've been involved in one way or another in the water business for some time. The town will not be alone. Apple Valley Ranchos has mounted a campaign, I think many of us have seen it, to convince its employees that they'll all be fired if the town were to take over this water system. And I think we need to recognize that and let them all know that that is just simply not the case. If the town were to acquire the system, the town would likely try to retain as many of AVR's Apple Valley Ranchos employees. They're talented, they're hardworking, and their service would be welcomed aboard. Many of the employees have expertise that cannot be easily replaced. They are residents of the town, they're our neighbors, and they are our friends. Arguably, their employees retained by the town would have more secure jobs than as public employees. And I'm going to just jump off this slide for a second and just relate a little bit, if I can, to some historical events. I came to work for the town of Apple Valley at incorporation in 1988. We've heard on many occasions publicly, what does the town know about managing and operating a water system? And I would ask a couple of other questions. What did the town know about running a city when it incorporated? What did the town know about operating a Parks and Rec department when the decision was made to dissolve the Parks and Rec department and bring that function under the roof of the town of Apple Valley? And I think arguably our Parks and Rec system today under the leadership of the town council is unmatched in this valley. It's won awards over and over, and I think it's a testament to this community, their political involvement, their constant counsel, and the good work done here at the town of Apple Valley. And that history should prove to everyone in this room that while the town of Apple Valley does not currently operate the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, its system, it certainly has the expertise to do it. Next slide. The alternatives. There are a number of alternatives, quite frankly. The town can contract the operation of the system to any other local public agency. The town can likewise contract the management of the system to any number of management companies that exist across the country that are in the business of privately managing public resources, and that is done in many locations today. Under the operational review, there will be some important differences in the operation. As has been alluded to, the town council would be responsible for oversight, not the CPUC. Nobody goes to San Francisco or has to argue long distance about an issue. They come straight to the town council. Profits would not be considered during the rate-making process. Rate setting would be subject to Prop 218 and its majority protest rules. The PUC would no longer be involved. The town would actively seek grants to lessen the burden on ratepayers, and as some of you may remember, the CEO of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company announced during a public discussion about grant possibilities that it was not in Apple Valley Ranchos or Park Water Company's best interest to seek grants. And we believe that the reason for that is that the state will not allow for those grant-funded facilities to be included in their rate base. Additionally, the town would look to implement a water reuse program without the threat of interference from a private utility. Next slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Now I'm going to call on Mark Puckett, our Assistant Town Manager of Finance and Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. And again, thank you all for coming tonight to hear this presentation. My name is Mark Puckett. I'm the Assistant Town Manager of Finance and Administration. I have been a Director of Finance for 28 and a half years. And for most of those years, I've worked for local cities that have owned their own public utility. So my role tonight is to tell you how we would pay for the acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos. So to begin, first we'd look at the system revenue requirements for a town-owned utility versus a privately held utility by Apple Valley Ranchos. There are certain standard components and certain differences in the revenue requirements. The standard components consist of water supply costs, commodity costs, such all utilities, administrative and overhead costs, and the capital repair and maintenance of the system. The specific differences between publicly held utility versus a privately held utility is that a publicly held utility does not have a profit motive. The town would not be promised a 9.7% rate of return by the California Public Utility Commission, as is the case with Apple Valley Ranchos. The town, pursuant to Prop 218, must only assess those rates that cover the costs of operation of the system, no more than the actual cost of operation. The town does not pay taxes. Apple Valley Ranchos, based upon the last publicly reported annual report, and that's for 2013, paid $3.5 million in taxes. Most of that was income taxes paid to the federal government. About $450,000 of it was paid to the town. The Apple Valley Ranchos also has, within their operating expenses, intercompany service agreements. These intercompany service agreements come into play between Park Water Company, the parent company, and Apple Valley Ranchos, Park Water Company in the LA County Basin, and the Missoula, Montana Mountain Water Company. Effectively, these intercompany service agreements are put in place where the parent company provides some form of service to the subsidiary company, and then is providing that service not only at the cost of the service, but at a profit as well. In the publicly reported annual report, it's cost plus a percentage. But within the report, it doesn't identify what that percentage profit is that they're paying themselves on those intercompany service agreements. Also, the difference between public ownership versus private ownership, we would need those revenue, the additional revenue, to pay for the acquisition of the system within the revenues that the town would collect. And next slide, please. So in issuing any debt, there's a number of components that we must look at, and components of that debt issuance, and some of those are listed here See the acquisition price, of course, acquisition costs. There are legal, engineering, and financial costs associated with the acquisition. We had also established a working capital reserve. The optimum level, as a rule of thumb, typically is reviewed as 3 months operating or 90 days worth of expenses, 25% of your operating budget. A capital reserve of roughly around $3 million. Capital expenses, this amount would be determined based upon an engineering assessment that we would do prior to acquisition. There would also be a bond reserve fund. Anytime you issue debt, typically you have an associated bond reserve fund, which typically is put in place to pay the last year's debt service on the debt issue. There may or may not be capitalized interest. That is determined by the timing of the debt issuance as that works together with the acquisition of the system. So what brought us to this point? The town initiated a review of the feasibility of acquiring Apple Valley Ranchos, and we engaged a consultant that performed an initial financial feasibility analysis. And this is extremely hard to read, I understand, but this initial financial feasibility analysis was only intended to demonstrate whether or not it was feasible to proceed at that point. Based upon that review, we determined that it was feasible to proceed within the existing rate structure, and that's extremely important. That means that we believed at that point, based upon that initial financial feasibility review, that the acquisition of the system could be accomplished within the existing rate structure. Next slide. So in reviewing what the expected range of values would be for acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos, as we heard earlier, we then initiated a draft appraisal of the system. That draft appraisal came to a conclusion of value of $45.54 million. So that was the amount that the independent appraiser determined was the value of Apple Valley Ranchos today, based on current market conditions, $45.54 million. Apple Valley Ranchos, as we've heard, will likely assert that the system is worth much more than that. We heard a little bit earlier about the offer from Algonquin Water to purchase the Park Water System from the Carlisle Group, which owns the Park Water System now, and Apple Valley Ranchos is part of that Park Water System. The Carlisle Group has accepted the offer from Algonquin to purchase the Park Water Company for $250 million. And when you hear those numbers in terms of what the purchase price is, that purchase price is for the net assets of the company. Net assets is assets minus liability. So that $250 million represents the net assets of Park Water Company. Park Water Company, again, and this, again, just as a rule of thumb so we can apply it to our expected range of values here, consists of 3 major assets: Park Water Company in the LA County Basin, Apple Valley Ranchos, and the Mountain Water Company in Missoula, Montana. Each of those systems are approximately equal in size. So assuming that they're approximately equal in size, we could divide that $250 million by 3 and get an expected range of value on the high end, we believe, of $83.3 million. So our thought is that we would need to finance a range of values somewhere between $45.54 million, the conclusion of value by our appraiser, and the $83.3 million, which is 1/3 of the accepted offer by the Carlisle Group for the purchase of Park Water Company by Algonquin Water. So looking at how we would finance that, we need to determine how large of a debt issue we would need to issue to fund the purchase of Ranchos based upon that range of values. So the first bullet point you see, based on the conclusion of value of $45.54 million, would require a sizing of the bond issue of $46 million and annual debt service payments of $2,883,000 for 30 years based on a financing interest rate of 4.75%. Now, could you please go back one slide? The second bullet point, based on the high end of the value of looking at the accepted offer by the Carlo Group of Algonquin's purchase price to $250 million, of that $83.3 million that we would expect would be applied to Apple Valley Ranchos. If we issued a bond for $83.3 million, the sizing of it, including the issuance costs, would be a little over $84 million. And that $84 million bond issue, financed over 30 years at 4.75%, would require annual debt service payments of $5,270,000. So based on our expected range of values, we would have an expected annual debt service payment that would range between $2.8 million and $5.3 million. So how do we pay for that? Could you please go forward? So in looking at how we would pay for it, we wanted to stick to the known information that we have. The known information that we have is based on, Frank, please go back, based on the annual report, and this is the only annual reporting requirement required of Apple Valley Ranchos. It's an annual report that's required to be presented to the CPUC as of March 31st each calendar year. It's based on, or it's due as of the following March 31st for the calendar year then ended. The only information that's available through the CPUC is a 2013 report, so that's what this analysis is based upon. The 2014 report has not yet been filed. We could not base it on any audited financial statements because Apple Valley Ranchos has never prepared an audited financial statement. They've always been a wholly owned subsidiary. They've never been audited. They don't have any audited financial statements that they would independently present with the same disclosures that would typically be seen in an audited financial statement. So we use that 2013 report as the basis for determining the source of funding to fund those estimated debt service payments that would be required. Next slide, please. So in looking at that the financing of the acquisition and the source of funding, selected data from that 2013 report, that 2013 report showed average annual active service connections of 19,233. It showed operating income of $3,653,000. And again, that $3,653,000 alone by itself is sufficient to fund the conclusion of value that our appraiser arrived at and the debt service that would be required to fund the acquisition based upon that conclusion of value, which as we just presented, was $2.8 million. Total taxes paid, we see, of $3.5 million. Again, the taxes alone that would be foregone because the town does not pay taxes is sufficient to fund the debt service on the conclusion of value by our appraiser. We also expect that there would be corporate office savings that the town would not would save as a result of not needing a corporate office of over $1 million. So we expect immediately, based on the existing rate structure, that within that existing rate structure today, there is available for debt service $8,164,000 based upon the 2013 annual report to the CPUC by Apple Valley Ranchos. Now, as you heard earlier tonight, there has been a rate case ruling issued in the favor of Apple Valley Ranchos, which will increase their rates by 9.85% as soon as that proposed decision goes into effect. There's a 20-day hearing period. Once that passes, the proposed decision is made final, your rates will increase by 9.85%. That 9.85% will also increase the available amount for debt service by a proportional amount. So just based on the information presented in the 2013 annual report filed by Apple Valley Ranchos, there is an amount available for debt service to purchase Apple Valley Ranchos between $8.1 million and $8.9 million. So taking that, next slide. So how large of a bond issue, in case we end up proceeding through the court process, if in fact it goes that direction, how large of a bond sizing can $8.1 million fund? So this first bullet point attempts to demonstrate that. If you based within that $8.1 million based debt service on equal payments of $6.5 million for 30 years at 4.75%, it would fund a bond sizing of $103.6 million, just based on $6.5 million. That would still leave additional funding available. Again, this is based on the 2013 report of $1.6 million annually for additional capital improvements to the system. As we saw earlier, the additional rate increase that Apple Valley Ranchos will soon impose, and assume that will also increase the amount available for debt service to $8.9 million. $8.9 million is, again, increasing that expected debt service payment to $7 million. A $7 million annual debt service payment would fund a bond sizing of $111.6 million based on 30 years and at 4.75%. That would leave almost $2 million each and every year to fund additional capital improvements to the system. Next slide, please. So let's say things went extremely badly, and we ended up going through the entire process to court, and the judge did not rule in the town's favor. If the town had to size debt based on that total $8.1 million that we saw was available for debt service, how much would that $8.1 million support in terms of a bond sizing? Again, using the same assumptions, 30 years at 4.75%, it would support a bond sizing of $130.1 million, including that 9.85% rate increase that Apple Valley Ranchos was just awarded. It would increase the total bond sizing that $8.9 million would support to $142.9 million. Now, I want to stop here for a moment because I want to emphasize a couple of things. First off, that bond sizing that we're looking at includes all costs of acquisition that are assumed that we presented in the earlier slides. It also, based upon current market conditions, the town can issue debt at slightly less than 4%, between 3.9 and 4%, based on current market conditions. So that's much less than the 4.75% assumed in this analysis. If we were to rerun those numbers based on the amount available for debt service, assuming 4% cost of issuance, which we can do today, we can issue debt today between 3.9 and 4% based on the town's credit rating at an A-rated institution. That sizing for $8.16 million increases the bond sizing to $143 million. At $8.96 million, it increases the bond sizing to $156 million that existing revenue would support. That's extremely important. And the one thought I want to add to that, we are in the process right now, we've reached out to the state revolving loan fund. Victor Valley Wastewater Reclamation Authority was successful in getting a very large loan through the through the state revolving loan fund. If we're successful in getting a similar size loan, we could finance the entire acquisition through the state revolving fund at an interest rate of 2%. 2%. So if we were to resize the debt based on issuing the bonds and what a $8.1 million in available revenue would support based on a 2% cost of issuance for 30 years, it would increase the sizing to $182 million that $8.1 million can support. For the $8.9 million, it increases the bond sizing to $200 million that $8.9 million will support. And that's extremely important to understand because what we've shown to you is that funding, that $8.1 million, that's funding that's available today based on the 2013 financial report that was filed by Apple Valley Ranchos. It's not, that information is available online. I would encourage you, if you have the interest, to go online and review the report for yourself. You can contact your own financial advisor and have them rerun the numbers. Those numbers in terms of the debt service, the sizing of the debt, are supportable within the existing rate structure. the town would not need to increase rates 1 cent to purchase Apple Valley Ranchos. We can keep the rates exactly where they're at. The funding is available within the existing rate structure to purchase Apple Valley Ranchos without increasing the rates at all. So what does that tell us? Well, we could do nothing for a year and the rates will increase by 9.85%. We still won't control our future. Or we can go back to the premise that is driving this process, move forward, attempt to stabilize rates and gain local control and provide the residents of this town with an opportunity to participate in the rate process, participate in control of the system, and participate in maintaining the cost of the system so that the water rates are affordable, so that we can attract new business and we can attract new residents to the town of Apple Valley. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, we're going to move right to public comments. What we're going to do, we have 2 podiums here for you. I'm going to call 2 names at once so that we have you, maybe if there's an empty seat, you can sit down if it's not your turn, but we'll kind of have you staged a little bit so that we'll get moving. First, Mr. Bill Yon.
My name is Bill Young. I'm Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Big Bear Lake. I came down tonight. I want to make it clear that I'm not speaking on behalf of my council or our Department of Water and Power. And to the contrary, I'm here tonight to speak as a private citizen. But I did want to come down and kind of clear the air a little bit. I understand there's been whispers about things that happened in Big Bear Lake, so I wanted to come down and just kind of give you the straight scoop and shed some light on what we did up there. Big Bear Lake bought, through a condemnation action, bought the water company from Golden State Water Company back in June of 1989. The base price for the water company at that time was $25 million. And with the bond cost and some infrastructure cost, which I'll get into in a minute, we closed the deal in the low $30 million. Now, it's been refinanced a couple of times. I'm happy to report that the bonds will be paid off in years 2019, 2020. But a number of people have asked why we proceeded with the purchase, and I can tell you that under Golden State Water, the citizens or the ratepayers of Big Bear Valley had absolutely no local control or accountability on the water system. We were seeing double-digit rate increases every year from Golden Valley, and we were losing 50% of the water that we were pumping out of the ground because of the poor infrastructure. It was so bad that the state of California came in and issued a cease and desist on building permits, and we were shut down for a while. We made some mistakes when the district was purchased. Number one, you've heard rumors that we paid too much for the district, and that's true, we did. Unfortunately, when we got into the condemnation procedures, Golden State sent their A team of lawyers and the city of Big Bear Lake sent their C team of lawyers, and we ended up paying more than the asset was worth. That was clear. Secondly, the infrastructure was a lot worse off than some would say was represented to us in the first place. So those were a couple of the big mistakes. But on the positive side, the district now has its own board of commissioners. They're appointed by the city council. They operate the district as an independent agency.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And the only influence that we have over that board is that we appoint the commissioners and we approve any water rate increases. And the board, is, as I mentioned, operates as an independent facility or an independent board. But the good news is, through some pressure from the council, when the bonds were retired, I'll just wrap it up real quick. When the bonds were retired, the commissioners have passed a resolution stating that they will pass that bond debt service back to the ratepayers.
Thank you, Mr. Yan. We appreciate you coming down the mountain. Next staging on this side will be Mr. Tom Piper, and we're going to go to Mr. Bill McDaniel.
Thank you. My name is Bill McDaniel. I'd like to compliment the council and the staff. That was an excellent report, and it shows us that we can do this without raising taxes. That's very important. I was a former member of the Blue Ribbon Study Committee, and during that study, I had two opinions. One is, philosophically, I'm against government taking over a private company. Politically, I'm a little bit right of Attila the Hun, but I don't think it's the appropriate thing to do. And I didn't see any way that the Apple Valley town could afford the acquisition. Well, I want to make it very clear. That was then, now is now. The landscape has changed. And I'm speaking in support of the town acquiring the water company. The same water company that's never been for sale but was sold. The same water company that still isn't for sale but is sold again. It's the same water company that is spending our ratepayer money to lobby us politically with mailings and folding it into their rate base. You know, we the ratepayers just can't afford what's going on right now. We can't afford the constant water increases, and we can't afford cutting back on water and seeing the rates increase, taking grass out, seeing the rates increase. Anything we do, the rates are always going up. And we also see that the cards are stacked against us with the PUC, who is supposedly there to protect us. But you know, all you got to do is go Google Mr. Michael Peavy and see how the PUC works. And I don't have time to cover it, but I could give you a story on that one. It just comes down to, who do you trust? Do you trust a private company that might be a Canadian company trying to make money for their stockholders, or do you trust a town that you can reach out and touch and talk to? I, for one, trust the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDaniel. Staging on this side will be Gracie Atwood, Mr. Tom Piper.
Hi, my name's, hello. My name's Tom Piper. I live in the sphere of influence in Apple Valley today. We're talking about a council here that rated on taxes and fees, both on trash. This is how they operate. They need so much money for the golf course. The last couple of years, they've raised a lot of fees. You don't think they're going to raise water rates? Yeah. And eminent domain is out and out theft. This town has had a chance to buy water. When they offered it on the open market, they offered it this town. We never made a bid, but then again, we didn't have any money. We spent it all on the golf course. Yeah, you know, with the drought, we probably have to cut back the golf course 25% from 27 holes to 18, but that's not going to happen. We'll eat rocks before we get rid of the grass at the golf course. It's a shame what this council's done to our town. It really is. You're trying to patch it up now, and I think you're a little late. We gave you $127 million in fines, fees, and taxes this year. You haven't spent a dime on it on water. Haven't done it since 1988. It's not all your fault. It's the entire council from 1988. We got a really nice building here. Wish we'd have spent it on water instead. Thank you.
Gracie Atwood. Tamara Alanez on this side, please. Welcome, Gracie.
Hi. My name is Gracie Atwood. I'm a property owner, and I receive bills from Ranchos Water Company. I've not read a lot about some of these things, but that marvelously put together handout that we had that was gone over by the different people was just marvelous and was very well done, and I thank you for it. So it probably answered some of my 4 questions. Within the last few weeks, they said on the news that the water companies couldn't charge any more to the customer than what it costs to get the water out of the ground and to them. And so I think that maybe Ranchos needs to pay us back a little bit that we've paid into their pockets. Anyway, if the company that will buy Ranchos turns around and involves a company in Canada to do whatever they will be doing, will this then remove any or all protection we consumers have from any agency in the United States to protect our rights? Needless to say, we've had poor experiences in the past in this particular area. Number 3, how can we consumers know if a selling or asking price for Ranchos is legitimate or inflated like our existing bills are? 4, is, has, was, or will there be some kind of an investigation into the past actions of the Public Utilities Commission in behalf of investors from Ranchos because of the consumer appears to not have anything done in their behalf? I like Albert Einstein very much because he says really neat things. And one of the things that he did say was that condemnation or condoning or condemning anything without proper investigation is very, very foolish and should never be done. In fact, he used more strong words than I did. I had a surprise one night when I turned on the water to brush my teeth, and the water that came out of the faucet into my glass was black. Naturally, it was about this color right here. And naturally, I was very, very upset about that. I called the water company, and a young man came out to investigate the next day. This was about the same time the
30
city's-
seconds.
Oh, but I've got a little bit more than that. Sorry. Here, having a similar problem may be Compton, but anyway, long story short, I didn't get any answers from the water company. They said it's safe to drink. And I don't like the idea of drinking black water. And I appreciate what Mr. Yan said because I'm a 47-year resident of Big Bear, and I help pay for a lot of that company that's up there. If the water company is sold and it ends up in Canada...
Time.
Go ahead and finish that sentence, but finish
Thank
quickly,
you.
please.
In Canada is sold and end up in Canada, which I understand is be a possibility, I would be very unhappy to think that the monies that I earned and paid taxes on in the USA and now receive Social Security from to live on in the USA, I want that money to stay in the United States, not go to Canada. And
Thank
because
you. I'm sorry, I have to cut you off.
All
I'm
right,
sorry.
Well, I brought the black water with me.
We will receive it, but thank you.
It's kind of all cozied up. It used to be...
Ms. Tamara Alanes. Tamara?
Thank you. Tamara Alanes. I'm an Apple Valley resident and Apple Valley Ranchos Water
Speak
Company
very
customer.
closely in that mic. Pull it up to you where you're comfortable.
Thanks,
If you
Barb.
can. I'm sorry.
How's that? Okay, excellent. I'm glad that we have this slide up here because my concern has been, as I've expressed to the town in the past, the fact that we're looking at going out and potentially purchasing bonds to purchase and then provide a service that we're already having at a good quality at a reasonable rate. I know that people have concerns with the prices of the water in Apple Valley Ranchos. I've heard it here at this evening and at other meetings as well. When you take those rates and you compare them to other neighboring districts, you're comparing apples to oranges. You take the city of Victorville. City of Victorville took over Baldy Mesa Water District and Victor Valley Water District. And where do you think the capital reserves from those two companies went to? Right into the general fund for the city of Victorville. $65 million gone, funneled into other costs, not the costs and operational needs of their water system. We have trash and we have sewer fees that we can see in our budget are budgeted to go under line 9999 into the general fund. I have serious concerns that if the town takes over the water company, that there will be similar actions undertaken. The last thing that I want to focus on is comments by this council regarding the request from the constituency to look into this issue. I have heard the opposite. I hear folks that don't want
the company taken over by the town. I hear folks that are concerned that the town doesn't know how to manage the water company. I appreciate Mr. Cron's discussions tonight, but I think I would like to further point out that in its own admission tonight, the town doesn't know about the system of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. There are a lot of unknowns and concerns, yet they are bragging about how they stepped in and pulled some of those capital improvements that were in the current rate case. I'm not going to pretend that I fully examined the rate case, as the legal team I'm sure did, to the nth billable hour, but I will say that I think that that needs additional focus by the town. I don't think that the town
30
is
seconds.
listening to those constituents who are citizens who do not want you to take over the water company, and therefore I'm forming the Apple Valley Citizens for Government Accountability, which is a citizen group that is against the town takeover of the water company. Feel free to log on to accountableav.com to find out more information about that. Of course, I'd be happy at any time to speak with any of you about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. We're going to excuse me if I'm, Leanne, excuse me. You'll be staging on this side. Mr. Raven?
Thank you. My name is Greg Raven. I live here in Apple Valley, and I'm utterly opposed to this takeover attempt. I had 18 questions. Some of them were addressed, so I'll deal with my remaining ones. Number 3 is that the town's belief that copying the practices of other cities is a good way to ensure Apple Valley's better way of life. Number 4 is that the town's belief that if a mob declares that water rates are too high, then the town has to act to appease the mob. Number 5 is that the town's intention to take control of every business in Apple Valley that is owned by out-of-town interests. Number 6 is that the town's contention that attacking the oldest continually operating business in Apple Valley after receiving decades of excellent service demonstrates that the town is business friendly. Number 7 is that the town's contention that preventing Ranchos from building additional water storage facilities is a benefit to its citizens, especially now that we are facing drought conditions. Number 8, does the town expect us to believe that if it wants a water rate increase after the takeover, the citizens will be better protected by the officials who want the increase than by the California Public Utilities Commission and the Office of Ratepayer Advocates who currently protect them? Number 9 is that the town's contention that an 86% increase in water rates over 10 years is outrageous, but a 75% increase in trash and sewer rates over that same period of time is evidence of sound fiscal policies. Number 10 is that the town's contention that having enough revenues, reserves, and credit to spend hundreds of millions of dollars purchasing Ranchos and the water rights to go along with it, which you've not mentioned yet, is better than lowering taxes or fixing roads or putting in curbs, gutters, and other infrastructure. Number 11 is that the town's position that when major capital improvements are needed for our water system, it is better for the town to come up with the money than it is for people outside our community to invest in our town. Number 12 is that the contention, or is there any connection, between the town's golf course, parks, and median landscaping being such heavy users of water with a sudden interest in purchasing Ranchos? Number 13, does the town still maintain that it has spent less than $250,000 in acquisition-related expenses when its own documents and public records indicate that it has paid in excess of $900,000 as of March 2015? Number 14, does the town expect us to believe that it will be forthright in reporting the true cost of the acquisition and operation of the water utility, given its track record with the golf course? Number 15, does the town have a spending cap such that if acquisition costs rise above that figure, it will discontinue this process? Number 16, is that the town's position
30
that it
seconds.
is better that the town spend 9% of the gross revenues from a water utility on debt service than for a private water utility to make a 9% profit? And finally, it is my hope that the town will stop falsely attacking Ranchos, it will stop attempting to control the narrative using fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and it will start telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this and other matters. I look forward to your responses.
Thank you, Mr. Raven. Bernadette McNulty, you'll be staging on this side, Bernadette. Leanne Lee, welcome.
Why do so many want us to be like Victorville, whose water fund is owed $35.5 million from their wastewater, and lacks the funding for infrastructure, maintenance, or catastrophic failure. Or like Hesperia with 13 million negative in water capital, 42 million in water debt. I don't understand being so anxious to take over Apple Valley Ranchos and incur high long-term debt far greater than the town would have us believe it to be. We need to pluck our heads out of our wallets and pay a little now for the benefit being received than putting this upon our children and grandchildren, like DWP in LA. We've all heard they now face the cost of $20 billion in infrastructure repair and have to settle the property losses that's been caused. Recently, the town audited and suspended the Chamber of Commerce, a chamber with only 2 employees. And I quote Town Manager Robinson in part on that audit. Appears to demonstrate a severe lack of internal controls and proper accounting procedures. Contrast that with Town Hall. Dennis Cron approves payments for facilities. Mark Puckett prepares and reports payments. Frank Robinson audits the payments. 5 council who approve the payments. 8 people who should exercise good internal controls and accounting procedures, 5 of whom should review warrants before rubber stamping approval. Why did you issue a check to Sierra Golf Management to replenish petty cash in the amount of $12,021.39? Whatever the excuse is, it was unacceptable. And this is only one example of your lack of internal control and proper accounting. Perhaps the town needs to be audited and services suspended as well. The town cannot run a golf course, nor can they run a water company. Their running of the wastewater is that they merely take care of the transmission lines that transmit feces to someone else to take care of. Much like the town's upper crust individuals, when it comes to verbal and written information to the public,
30 seconds.
They merely transmit feces.
Thank you, Leanne Lee. Richard Rorix, you'll be next on this side. Is Mr. Rorix still here? There he is. Okay. Bernadette McNulty, welcome.
I have resided in Apple Valley for 20 years and owned property here since 1988. And for more than 20 years, I was a consultant to the Southern California Edison Company, utilities in 9 western states, some utilities in foreign countries. In 2011, I was appointed to serve on the Town of Apple Valley Blue Ribbon Water Committee and served without compensation for 8 months, heard testimony, reviewed thousands of documents, made recommendations, and despite all this work on the committee, Administrative Law Judge Long approved the merger of the Carlisle Group and Park Water Company, and the acquisition went forward in 2011. Since that time, the price of the company has more than doubled, so that we are now in a second round of negotiations to again sell Park Water Company. So I'm wondering exactly when does it stop? I think the town of Apple Valley needs to control its own water destiny. I think the Carlisle Group negotiated with the town in bad faith, did a handshake agreement, a verbal agreement, said, yes, we're going to sell you Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, and then did an end run around the town, asked Wells Fargo Bank to go out and get bids on the open market, wouldn't let the town to participate in the bidding process, wouldn't give the town any information, has failed to hire an independent appraiser, which the town has done. So I support the town's desire now to get control of its own water destiny, take over Apple Valley Ranchos, and run it. I don't want a Canadian company determining the water destiny of our town. That should be controlled by the town with local oversight and local accountability. I don't want to have to run to San Francisco every time there's a hearing. I want to be able to talk to my elected officials, and if they don't do a good job, I want to be able to vote them out of office. I want to be able to make sure that they don't violate the Brown Act. I want to make sure that the accounting is very, very precise, and I want to make sure that the good old boys aren't running the water company. So, please, go forward with this. It looks like we might be able to afford it. My only concern would be is that you never know in an eminent domain condemnation proceeding exactly what it's going to cost. So we have to be mindful of that.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Bernadette. Bob Giovannucci will be staging over here, and Mr. Richard Rorix, welcome.
Good afternoon, evening, whatever it is anymore.
Pull that mic up to you,
Yeah,
Richard, please.
It sometimes works.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
I have 3/4 of an acre roughly, and I use about 130 CCF a year. So my water bill is reasonable. I have lawn, I have trees, I have roses, so, you know, I don't understand where people put it. But over the years, I have rarely seen an occasion where any government entity has taken over a private business and was successful in the long run. Sometimes they do very well for the first part, but they don't plan out. I mean, we've got LA, their water system is bad. New York is terrible. Chicago, they're all municipal company, you know, water systems, but they're horrible. In fact, for years in Chicago, you couldn't drink the water. That's why they drank a lot of beer. Anyway, but you know, it's easy to make statistics come up with whatever you want it to say. I mean, what do they say? Figures don't lie, but liars figure. But I've never seen one thing. I've never seen anybody talk about how are they going to replace the property taxes that Ranchos pays. I mean, that's a big chunk of money every year. Well, where's it going to, you know, you don't have it, so how are you going to replace it in the town? Anyway, the other thing is eminent domain, to use an apt metaphor, will poison the well for a long time. I mean, people will become extremely bitter if you have to use eminent domain. I know it's legal and all that nonsense, but it still is stealing from a private business. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Francis Scott on this side, please. Welcome, Mr. Let me get this. I like saying this name.
Smith.
Bob Giovannucci. Did I say it right?
Smith.
Welcome. Smith, wait a minute. No. Welcome.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. Members of the board, my name is Bob Giovannucci, and I'm a resident of Apple Valley since 1999. I came here as a proponent of no government takeover of Apple Valley Ranchos. I have been a participant in prior citizen challenges to anticipated town council actions. Most necessarily the anticipated town council action of the fire department to the San Bernardino County Fire Department. At that time, it was it's not broken, don't try to fix it mantra was in place, and I think our bishop can testify that it got a little raucous. But they did prevail, and the Apple Valley Fire Department is still in our domain. After reading the town's presentation, listening to the presenters, and reading the available literature, I have come to the conclusion that this issue today is not about takeover of a private firm, but it is about us, the citizens of Apple Valley, stopping the roller coaster of an international conglomerate from raping us, users of Apple Valley water, with continuing and ever-increasing rates to satisfy their shareholders and investors. It is a clear case that greed is driving the higher rates that we must pay. We do not need higher rates. We are already strapped to pay current rates. So I would like to thank our town council for doing such a diligent research and taking time to make tonight's very informative presentation. They are honest in their facts and seem to be dedicated to serving and protecting the citizens of Apple Valley. So I say this, go get them. Let's get off this ever-increasing greed-based rate roller coaster in this case. In this case, the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company is broken. Let's fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Francis Scott. And on this side, Carl Tate. Welcome, Mr. Scott.
My name's Francis Scott, and I want to congratulate you guys for taking the initiative.
Let me stop you, Mr. Scott. Can someone straighten that podium for him? It's kind of, and help him. I understand many of you are a little not used to microphones, but so that everyone can hear you. Thank you, Mr. Operator. Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Ever since the last rate hike, I've been talking to people on these, the city taking over the water company. I've talked to hundreds of people, and 8 out of 10 people I talked to is all for the city taking over the water company because we're getting took by foreign people. And they are foreign people because it's going out of, there's money going out of the country from our water bill. I think that the city council is doing the city a great service by taking this initiative to, they might not be the greatest, but they can't do no worse than we've been getting now. And if you try to justify this other company, you just can't do it because there's, look how their rates are going up. They trying to rape us on everything. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. On this side, we'll have Dana Davis. Mr. Tate, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and honorable councilmen and members of the staff. As a Republican, I'm definitely against government takeover of private businesses. However, that being said, the council, I think, is uniquely qualified. You've elected some very qualified people. My good friend Kurt Emick, who's not here tonight, is a businessman running individual and multiple pharmacies throughout Southern California and the western states. Barb's a well-known radio personality, and she grew up in the car business, I know. Bought a few from her dad. Scott, you should book a vacation to Hawaii because I've been supporting you for the last few months with High Desert Automotive in Hesperia with all Napa parts. So, with that being said, I did have some questions. I was a little concerned when the council apparently took out $7 million of money that was set aside for project improvements. We don't need any more situations like Seneca and Apple Valley Road. That's flooded out twice in the last few years because of poor pipes that burst, flooded the homes, flooded the streets, and lost us thousands and thousands of gallons of precious water. So I don't know if that was a good move or not. And let's see, I had that. Okay, on the CEQA, we have an attorney that's in charge of that for the city. Why? Why not ask for a negative declaration and just have our own staff prepare that? When I was on the Board of Trustees and president of the board at Victor Valley College, I did $60 million in infrastructure improvements based on negative declarations, and that including rezoning and annexation of part of Victorville, part of Spring Valley Lake into Victorville. It can be done, and we don't need to waste 8 months of time if we're going to get going on this. And 8 to 12 months is a minimum guesstimate if you go through the environmental. What's environmental? We're buying an existing business. We're not adding anything to it. We're going to improve the operations if the council goes ahead with this program. So save your money.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I'll give up my time to somebody else.
Thank you, Mr. Tate. We appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, it's Donna Davis, so excuse me.
This is Donna Davis.
Give me just a moment. Kay Walraven, you'll be next on this side, please. Go ahead, Donna.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Get a little closer. Just a little bit.
Okay,
There
can you hear
go.
me now? All righty.
Everybody good?
A few weeks ago, I was evacuated by the river bottom fire. 3 engines and 8 firemen battled the fire 11 hours at my house. The fire burned right up to the house, burning the landscaping and around the house. Helicopters dumped water, load after load. The fire flared up 3 different times after they put it out. We need a new roof, windows on the side of the house. Smoke damage was extensive. The greenhouse burned. Thanks to the firemen, the house did not burn. 2 weeks ago, I thought I should call Apple Valley Ranchos and ask them if I could get all the water from this month's bill at the first rate, because they used the hoses at my house to save my house. I talked to a really sweet lady. She says, well, I've never heard of such a thing. I said, you've never heard? I Googled it. You can get an emergency waiver. And I was told that she didn't think and I said, can you please ask your superior? She said, yes, she would. She came back a few minutes later and told me that she thought that the superior thought the thing to do would be send the water bill, to the fire department. I said, hell no. They saved my house. The person that told me that, the person that made my decision to come here tonight, was the people at Apple Valley Ranchos. I can do nothing to impact their rates. However, if you guys screw up, I can launch a campaign and get your butts fired. So for that reason, I say you should have local control, and you guys should go ahead.
Thank you, Donna Davis. Staging on this side, Emily Saltmaris. Hope I said that right. Welcome, Kay.
Thank you, council members. My name is Kay Walraven. I've been a citizen of Apple Valley since 1988, and what I'd like to say first as a citizen is, of course, I do not believe in government takeover of a private company. Apple Valley Ranchos employs local people. They pay their taxes, and they do business, lots of business with other businesses in the high desert. Therefore, I don't believe in taking away another private company that adds to the economy. Number 2, I am also a customer of Golden State Water Company, and we have 5 or 6 fuel surcharge lines on our bill too. I don't have a problem with our bill. I pay the water bill. We have beautiful trees on our property. We have dirt, and we also have some vegetation, but we pay what we use. But my question to you is, would the town of Apple Valley also condemn Golden State and other mutual water systems down the road if they acquire Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company? Number 3, I am also, and just to make it clear, I had made my decision about the takeover months ago. I am now an employee of Apple Valley Water Ranchos Company for the last couple of months. And I want to point out that on slide 50 of your PowerPoint, where the town will not be alone, it says AVR has mounted a campaign of fear to convince its employees that they'll all be fired by the town. There's no such thing as a campaign of fear. I don't know where you heard about that, but nobody has ever told me that I would be fired by the town if you acquired the water company. No one has Nothing. It may be natural, as I was talking to one of our employees earlier, it may be a natural fear, you know, when you have a takeover, that you could lose your job. But Apple Valley Ranchos Company has never put a campaign together to tell us employees that we would be
30
fired by the
seconds.
town. Thank you. Also, I just want to let you know, too, Liberty Utilities has assured us that we will keep our jobs. And also, I'm a little confused about keeping the money here. We get paid, employees, we get paid here. I know probably some of the money goes to Canada, but a lot of the money stays here because we buy things here. We work for the water company. We get paid paychecks. We use our money here in the high desert. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Jerry Vincent on this side, and now speaking is Emily Salt-Maris. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm also live in the county of San Bernardino on the outskirts of Apple Valley, and I too have a mutual water company that provides our community with water. And just like Kay, I'm very concerned that will you be taking and condemning other mutual water companies just because of their high water rates? I also already pay for debt 1 and debt 2 on my property taxes for the Mojave Water Agency. And if you take out bonds, will I see your debts on my property taxes for water that I will not be drinking? And that's all. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much, Emily. David Mueller, staging over here, and Jerry Vincent, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and fellow council members. Thank you for your time tonight to listen to us. I'm here primarily to express my concerns about the town acquiring AVR. And I think most of what needs to be said on a technical sense has been said. But I just want to refer back to something that I'm greatly concerned about as an American. I'm concerned about my fellow Americans not understanding how slowly we're losing our freedoms that have been so hardly and bloodily fought for. And likewise, I am concerned about our capitalistic system here in America. And that includes the value of our free enterprise system. Excuse me, it's time to take my pill.
That's a gentle reminder to shut off your cell phones unless it's for the pill.
I had it turned down, but for that it's... Anyway, like I was saying, my concern is that I'm a pro-free enterprise person. And like the lady in red just really pointed out, you know, businesses provide us an excellent way of living. And I hate seeing the small businesses suffer under regulation and more regulation. And this administration has been hard on our American businesses. And so for this reason, I'm basically letting you know it's just a matter of principle for me, and not against the council per se, but as a whole. I want to support the free enterprise systems, and I do not want to see this city take over this water company. Okay? Thank you very much. And one other quick comment, please. I understand lately, I just found this out, that the town spent about $600,000 in legal fees over several months for their water rights on the golf course, and that's a concern for me. That's a lot of money, I think, for accomplishing that. And like someone else has commented, I have a bitterness towards eminent domain, and I just don't like seeing that process take place. And I'm sure there's an expense involved with that. I don't know what it is, but that's something we need to consider as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Mr. Al Rice, staging here. Mr. David Mueller, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Dave Mueller. I've lived in the town for 34 years, so I'm not a newcomer. I'd like to ask all the supporters of the town's acquisition or possible acquisition. Did you watch the trial, the Missoula trial? I watched almost every second of it. And Carlisle proved, in my opinion, that the city of Missoula did not have a greater purpose in taking ownership of that company. I believe they're going to lose. I believe they will lose. I think private companies do a better job of running things than public sector. If you don't believe that, look at the government with the Department of Defense and $500 hammers. I'd like you to look at the last meeting, the 22nd of April, that these people went to. It had to do with the winding up.
Mr. Mueller, please address the council.
I'm
We need
addressing
you.
the people. I don't
You
care
need.
about
We
you
need you addressing the council. That
All
was
right, I
clearly
will-
just.
Do I get my time
Stop.
that you're
Stop,
wasting?
Mr.
You're
Mueller.
wasting my time. This
Mr.
is my
Mueller,
3 minutes.
stop. Your time is stopped for the moment. You came in late. We clearly laid out the rules. We ask that you please address the council. Your message is being heard, but be respectful to the people sitting here, okay? Now, we'll start his time appropriately. You won't miss a second, but please, I'm asking you to address the council. Thank
I
you.
would like the public, because the council won't tell you this, but I would like the public to go to the April 22nd special meeting and look at how this council and these financial experts wound down the RDA. Look at the letter from the Department of Finance that says that the $13 million the town loaned to the RDA, $10 million of it is unaccounted for. And you want these people to float bonds and run this company? You are crazy. They can't run the golf course. They can't run parks and recreation. They're not. Read what the Department of Finance said about their accounting. I've lived here 34 years, and I remember when this town incorporated. We started out fine, but it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Let me tell you what I got told about this public. If we're here, we can locally talk to these folks. The response I got from Mr. Puckett was, don't contact me anymore. If you do by email, I will ignore them. That's the kind of public service you'll get from them. The Ranchos actually has a customer service department, and they don't treat their customers like that. I am totally against this. I tell everybody,
30
please
seconds.
go to the City of Nashua, New Hampshire versus Pennachuck Water Corporation. Their council told them we can get this for $80 million. They settled for $220 million, and their rates are going up out of sight because they cannot run it. They don't have the expertise to run it. Just look it up. Don't believe me? Look it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. Laura Quigley, on this side, please. Welcome, Mr. Rice.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Stanton. My name is Al Rice. I've lived in Apple Valley 15 years. This old timer with white hair believes in a guiding life principle. I learned a lot of this at Naval War College, where I was a war planner. There are two critical issues involved here. Just because you can does not mean you should. Can you and should you is something you've got to look at your own self-control. That's something internally you're going to have to look at. Now on the appraisal, I used to do appraisals. This guy has given you some documentation. You guys have cherry-picked it, put some basic information in that's not supported by relevant facts. Your website currently shows on this document here $86 million at the top, and it goes down to something called $46 million, but it doesn't add up. You guys are off about $12 million. Just look at your own website. It doesn't account. It doesn't add. Last week I asked for public records to try to get my own arms around this, some transparency, but the documents have not been provided. Valued standardized appraisals are expected to allow another to walk in the same steps and achieve the same value. This has not been done. I can't follow this character. You guys have spent all this money. I've asked for the docs, don't know what's going on. And I'm just one resident. The appraisal lacks 1/3. It doesn't say anything about the comparability. The attorneys say, oh, it's got 3 values. That's baloney. That's what it's supposed to have, but it don't. I am not convinced that the town of Apple Valley can manage all aspects of this transaction, which directly impacts the taxpayers and Rancho customers now and in the future growth. What is your growth expansion projection? Nobody said anything about that. Nobody's looked at the growth. People have talked about buying Golden West and some others. The town of Apple Valley is expending large amounts of money, time, and efforts already and needs to continue with attorneys receiving a very significant amount of taxpayers' funds and seems to be overstepping his legal advice boundaries in
30
acting
seconds.
as a project manager for the survey and other projects. Who's leading and taking charge and showing an extra commitment going forward? One of the things that Mr. Puckett got real excited about is $1 million in capital improvement budget. Ranchos is putting out $30 million a year, I think. I would like to analyze your presentation details much, much further because I think there's some holes in it. I'd like to get the documents so I can look.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Jeff Kennard, staging over here, please. Laura Quigley, welcome.
Hi, my name is Laura Quigley. I've been a resident of Apple Valley since 1999. I'm a teacher, so I don't have a script, so I do this every day for the last 33 years. Basically, I just want to say I think you gave a great presentation. It was very thorough, and it was obviously came from the heart. I think you guys are here for our benefit. Personally, I don't want to have to pay my money for something like essential like water to a monopoly who is in it for profit. You are not a for-profit entity. You're here for this town. We elected you, and I appreciate what you're doing and continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. All right, is this Kevin Phillips? Did I call?
Jeff Kennard.
Hold on. Who are you, sir? I'm sorry.
Jeff
Oh,
Kennard.
yes, I got Mick. Hold on. Okay, so staging over here will be Kevin Phillips. And welcome, Mr. Kennard. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ackerman and Mr. McVeigh said some very interesting things in your presentation. And if I could buy a $500,000 car for $5,000, I'd go for it too. But then some questions kind of arose. On page 18, it states that the appraiser reviewed the financial data and toured the Apple Valley water system with AVR. How can I believe the valuation set forth by the appraisers? I'm the one who took them around. They went to 5 of my sites. We have over 35 sites. They went to 5 sites, and I'm supposed to take that appraiser's word that he looked at my system and told me what it was worth? I don't see how I can believe that value. And then Mr. Ackerman was very pleased and very proud that he was able to cut down $8.5 million in new facilities. A water system is a capital-intensive venture. And if you don't invest into the future, if you don't invest into your infrastructure, then it won't be there 20, 30 years down the line. You'll be another DWP in Los Angeles with 100-year-old pipes that are bursting under paved streets and destroying property. And then nobody ever mentioned water rights. We own over $60 million in water rights, and I don't even believe they were mentioned. I think that would be something that you would want to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennard. Staging over here, Arnold Jimenez. I hope I'm saying that right. And welcome, Mr. Kevin Phillips.
Hi, my name is Kevin Phillips. I have been a resident here for the past 30 years. I've worked for Ranchos Water for the past 25 years. You mentioned that none of the employees would be fired or laid off from Ranchos. And I really want to know how that's going to work, because we're in a drought. You get your revenues to pay us by how much we bring in. Well, we're in a drought, so people are going to start what? Conserving. So what's that going to do to your revenues? Well, your revenues are going to go down. And so does that mean that you're going to start laying employees off? So I'd like to know that. And then on top of that, again, we're in a drought. And you and I and the rest of these folks in this room have been asked to conserve water and conserve another 35%. Do you know that right now water's being taken out of the San Bernardino Mountains and bottled and sent to different states and whatnot? That's under the government. I think that's exactly what would happen if a government control of Apple Valley Ranchos water. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Okay, so let me make sure I've got this right here. Oh, hi, it's nice. I think I recognize this gentleman. Okay, hold on. The next one is just listed Paul. I guess you know who you are, Paul. Arnold, welcome. Go ahead.
This is kind of new to me to come to a forum like this, so it's good to see people, and everybody, they've covered, it seems like people have covered a couple of things I wanted to cover. You know, I don't live in the Rancho Water District, and I don't see how other people in Apple Valley aren't going to have to pay some of this. You know, so that's, hopefully you guys can consider that, but the way it looks is we'll have to pay, and you know, we're not in that mutual water company. The other thing, though, you know, is I also don't trust government, and I'm a Democrat, you know, taking over companies like this. But, you know, also 10% is a lot of money, right? And then they'll want more money later. And these people are really rich already, right? The people in Carlisle. Now, I don't know the answer, but hopefully Americans doing what you're doing now. You know, see, and everybody, a lot of people here are older, right? So when this money is all coming due and the rich are getting their 10%, 20%, we're going to be even older. And we're retired, and so the kids can't pay for this. And this is just water, right? You're saying you could take 10% for water. That means you could take how much they want for other stuff, right? So it's good to say because we're all capitalists, and whatever amount you can make, but the kids aren't going to be able to pay for it, right? So it's just a broader way to look at it. I think myself, I just think 10% is a lot of money, right? If they wanted 2% or something, closer to the interest rate, right, which is what, 0.0001 or something. Then, all right, capitalists go take a profit, right? But 10%, that's a lot of money. I don't know the answer.
Thank you very much. All right, Paul, and on this side, Michael Davis. Welcome, Paul.
Hello. My name is Paul Guerrero. I've been
speak close to the mic, please.
I've been an Apple Valley resident for 9 years now, and I guess water is real important to me, like it is to everybody else. I think that one of the things that causes...
You've got to speak closer to the mic. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Okay,
we can't hear you.
One of the things that I think causes a lot of problem, whether it's private or governmentally run, is that the vast majority of the people are ignorant of a water industry, a water plant. And I think one of the things that might cure that ignorance or that lack of knowledge or information, because I think anybody can be taken advantage of if they're not well aware of the goings-on with any kind of endeavor. And I think a volunteer program may be something that will help us along in terms of educating the public and allowing them to volunteer in the plant and become familiar and aware. It's not that difficult to deal with water. I think everyone deals with water daily, and although there's maybe a few items that are specialized and technical. I don't think it's too difficult for any one of us in this room to learn the ins and outs of what it would take to manage such a facility. I think maybe if there were incentives as well to reduce part of your individual bill, if you volunteer so many hours, even credit on the junior high and high school level, develop an educational program that would educate the students, our young people, on what it takes to run a business, to run a facility, a water facility. I don't think that would be a difficult thing. I think even to the point where we could even have a mandatory volunteer situation where everybody receiving the water would be required to give 1 hour
30
a month.
seconds.
1 hour a month out of their time to help out with whatever maintenance or whatever jobs are needed. Also, the educational program in the junior high and the high school will entail teaching students not only the ins and outs of piping water, but utilizing
Address
water
the council, please.
First and second time usage. Third times, and the last thing really quickly is to remember that water is sacred.
Okay.
And that all of us need it. And
thank you, Paul, very much. Appreciate you. Michael Davis, and William or Bill Sorensen on this side. Welcome, Michael.
Good evening, members of the council. I have lived in Apple Valley since 1986, and I've been practicing law since long before that. And fortunately for me, most of my practice has been in the area of water law. And I've represented dozens of clients, been through 2 adjudications. Unfortunately, I was the attorney that represented the Victor Valley Water District and the Baldy Mesa Water District when the city of Victorville took them over. And I lost that battle. But that wasn't the same as this is. That was one public agency taking over other public agencies. I'm just slightly to the left of Bill McDaniel. That doesn't make me Attila the Hun, but I am, as a general sense, philosophically opposed to public agencies taking over private entities. This is not that. This is totally different. I've watched Ranchos. I represented 20-some clients in the Mojave Basin area groundwater adjudication. I sat at the table with their counsel and their general managers, watched the negotiations, looked at the data, talked to them about the processes. A public utilities commission regulated entity like Ranchos is not a private entity that's based on what we all believe is the right way to go. This council has a challenge in front of it. It needs, despite the opposition, to do the right thing. Ranchos is not respecting the people in Apple Valley. Pipes break all the time. My property has been flooded at least 5 times I can think of. And when I call, I'm told there is not money available for the repairs. There is not money available for mainline construction. The last time Ranchos came out to perform repairs on the connection between my house and Riverside Drive, there were almost 700 patches, and that's less than a block. It was constant patches all the way through. That's not being responsible. I would hope that this council sticks by its guns. I know no decisions have been made. Please proceed. Do what's right for the town of Apple Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Next, staging, I think we had this person. There's not another Arnold Jimenez here, is there tonight? No, all right. So, William, you welcome, Bill. You are the last speaker tonight. This is Bill Sorensen.
Bill Sorensen. I've been here since 1999,
resident of Apple Valley, Ranchos water customer too. And since 1999, excuse me, and I want to bring up a couple of instances. About 5 years ago, there was I had a leak over on the easement, not my line, but the neighbors over on the easement. And I reported it 4 times to the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company over a 2-month period, and they kept telling me they couldn't find it. So it was water in the easement, and the rabbits were getting all the water they wanted. Yeah, and I finally found it. And at one time, I had a lawn. My front yard looked like a park, but I can't afford that no more. I'm a senior citizen on fixed income, so I got dirt. And if I cut back anymore, I have to quit taking showers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sorensen. Is there anyone out there who filled out a card that we missed? Okay, I'm happy to hear that. We're going to reconvene. Thank you so much for coming back with us. Our town attorney, Mr. Brown, tells me that they've identified many of the questions, as you heard, kind of overlapped. So they have at least 10 questions that they will speak towards right now. And again, thanks for staying with us. Mr. Brown?
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you who attended tonight and participated. It's a pleasure for us to receive questions in a town meeting like this, and also a pleasure to respond to them as best we can. But I would also encourage, I consider this a significant policy decision for this community to be made by you and your town council. And these questions are simply intended to address as best we can this evening some of the legal questions that came up. But I would encourage you to continue your questions and your dialogue because I think it's important to the town council. I did not make an effort, because no one elected me, the town attorney, to the town council to feel that it's appropriate to respond to expressions of opinion. Many of you were very insightful in your expressions of opinion. We have a great respect for those opinions. I'm not going to argue with any of you. It's inappropriate. I'm going to try to respond to what I perceive to be as questions that would continue the dialogue that was begun earlier. Ms. Atwood had basically 4 questions. I'm going to try to fob some of these off to other people, but her first question was, would the proposed acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company by Algonquin Water and Power through its United States affiliate, Liberty Utilities, mean no control with respect to the laws of the United States of America, or for that matter, the laws of the state of California? The answer to that is absolutely not. The proposed acquisition would take place in accordance with both the laws of Canada as well as the laws of the United States. My mom and dad are from Canada, great respect for that country. It would in fact mean that the new owner would be subject to the ongoing jurisdiction of both the Securities and Exchange Commission with respect to issues of securities, and as many of you know, would simply step into the shoes of Carlisle with respect to the California Public Utilities process. How do we know if the purchase price is inflated? That's sort of a leading question, but I think I can dodge that by saying we do not know how the proposed purchase price of Park Water Company was established. We have access to some limited information, including the testimony of the Chief Executive Officer, I believe it was, or the CFO of Liberty, that Liberty came down and went to Missoula, I presume. He certainly said he came to the town of Apple Valley, and I'm assuming they went down into Los Angeles and kicked the tires, so to speak, and felt that they had offered an appropriate purchase price. We have no knowledge or information about that process involving a formal appraisal of any sort, nor have we been, the town had any information made available to it that would justify the proposed purchase price. Ms. Atwood continued really quickly, will there be a CPUC investigation because the ratepayers are not protected? As I indicated, they are protected, and I don't believe there'll be any CPUC proceeding beyond what has already been proposed, and we outlined those in our presentation tonight. Her final question, Ms. Atwood, was, is black water safe to drink? I don't know the answer to that question, but I will tell you that Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company is held to the same public health standards as any other municipal water purveyor in the state of California. And many of you are aware of the report that's produced annually by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. It's as good as I've seen, and I suggest to you that any of you who have questions about is black water safe to drink, look at their annual reports as to the constituents and the safety of their water. Ms. Alanis, I believe it is. Alanis, excuse me. Asked, wouldn't the money go right into the general fund? I've been a municipal attorney for 40 years. There has been a tremendous sea change in the last 10 years in California law. It is absolutely impossible for the kinds of transfers that we might have seen 15 or 20 years with respect to taking money out of the utility funds and transferring them to general funds. It's simply prohibited by California law. It's prohibited by court decisions. And generally speaking, it would not be possible for this town council, if it owned and operated the local water system, to create a slush fund for anything other than the operation of the water system. I tried to take good notes on Mr. Raven's questions, good questions, but by and large, I think that they were largely expressions of opinion. However, Mr. Raven did ask, why didn't you mention water rights? And I think, Mr. Raven, it may have been that we went through this too quickly, but if you go back through the presentations, we indicated on at least 3 or 4 different occasions that these projections, the information presented to the public this evening, is in fact one inclusive of water rights. And I'll have to tell you that that is in keeping, Mr. Raven and others who had this question, that is in keeping with the fact that the purchase price that Carlisle Infrastructure paid for Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company made no effort to separate out the water rights that were acquired and was a rate-based purchase. And the proposed purchase price by Liberty, Algonquin Water and Power is a rate-based purchase and makes no effort to separately value water rights. And these rates of $150 million or $200 million or $300 million that I've read about here in the town would suggest to me that the town that question ought to more appropriately go back to Carlisle and Liberty. Is somebody leaving a lot of money on the table? I'm not sure, but that's what the numbers would suggest to me. And one more thing that I think is important to add to the response to that question to Mr. Raven. If in fact Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company is telling the public that they could go out and sell those water rights on the open market for $150 million or more, that's something that the ratepayers need to know about, because if those water rates are for sale or they are intending to sell them, that will indeed have a horrendous effect on the town of Apple Valley, because that is suggesting to me that they are proposing that those are marketable water rights that could be sold and separated out from the existing water company. And I would suggest to you that as a matter of law, as a matter of public policy, I would expect the governor himself to come down if that were ever to arise. It just is not legally possible. I'm going to, if I can, just quickly move on, Mr. Raven. Please excuse me, to Leanne, Ms. Lee's questions. She asked, first of all, I don't think it's appropriate to respond to the question about whether we want to be a looky-loo like Victorville or Hesperia. The very essence of our presentation, ladies and gentlemen, was intended to be something that sets in front of you, the ratepayers, the policy questions to be addressed by you and your town council. This has nothing to do with Victorville, Hesperia, Beverly Hills, or Newport Beach. Does the town have internal controls? The town has been repeatedly recognized by financial officers and professionals nationally for its accounting system. The town annually prepares an audited financial statement that is completed once a year. It is available for public inspection. It is posted to the town's website, and we have been recognized for that. There was a reference in Ms. Lee's next question to replenishing petty cash and a reference to that. I don't know if that was an opinion, but do you want to respond to that? Why can't we account for the petty cash at the golf course? I think was putting a dignified face on the question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Brown. The question was why did we reimburse the Sierra Golf Management $12,000 for petty cash reimbursement? It was not just for petty cash reimbursement. In our accounting system, if there's several checks going to the same vendor, one might be for petty cash, one might be for their management fee, one might be for some other thing. The system will pick up the descriptions based upon the order in which they're entered into the system. Apparently on our warrant register, the petty cash reimbursement was listed first, so that was the first entry that was picked up on that description listed on the warrant register. If the individual who had saw that entry would have interest, feel free to come to my office. I'll pull the warrant. You can take a look at what that particular check was issued for, and I'm sure you'll see that it was not just for petty cash. I'm sure it was for petty cash, their management fee, and perhaps their payroll, because we do pay their payroll.
And I think most importantly, the town is subject to the California Public Records Act. Questions like that can be examined in depth by putting in requests for information that relate to those issues. We get and we respond to those questions routinely, as many of you in the audience know. And I can assure you that if I ask my friends at Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company tonight questions about their petty cash, I wouldn't, no information whatsoever would be forthcoming to me. Let's see, Bob Smith, Mr. Tate, thank you for your questions. Good question from Richard Rorex. How will the town of Apple Valley replace the taxes paid by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company should it acquire the water system? Ladies and gentlemen, the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company has paid taxes in San Bernardino County and in the town of Apple Valley since 1945. I know it's appreciated by Mr. Devereaux, the county administrator, and by the town and the town council. And the answer to that question is that would have to be, in fact, incorporated into any financing plan should the town council decide to go forward. Because, in fact, there would be a loss of property taxes resulting from the town's acquisition of property which is currently on the tax roll. And that's presently the case with respect to many of the projects going on up here in the high desert that involve the acquisition of roadway, freeway, interchanges, and so on. All of that property, as many of you know, is removed from the tax roll once it is acquired by the county, Sandbag, Caltrans, and so on. Jason had a question about, this is for Mr. Ackerman, Mike. There were several questions that related, and these were great questions, as to the process in front of the CPUC by which a determination is made that certain requested public capital improvements during the coming 3-year rate cycle should be removed from the application for a rate increase. I hope I'm saying that appropriately. You saw some slides about that, and you saw some folks that said, well, that's not a good idea. Why are we removing those capital improvements? Mr. Ackerman is going to explain to you that that's a decision ultimately made by the administrative law judge of the California Public Utilities Commission. The town had input, of course, but Jason will respond to why that's an appropriate process.
You bet, John. Thank you. In the proposed decision, the administrative law judge documented a recent history of Apple Valley Ranchos aggressively investing in fact, exceeding CPUC authorized expenditure amounts for main replacement projects. And so in her opinion, she determined that only about $8 million of the $15 or $16 million that were proposed over this next rate cycle were reasonable and necessary during this general rate case or this rate cycle. That is not to say if those projects become reasonable and necessary at a later time, they can be included in a subsequent general rate case application. But
Thanks.
At this point, yes,
Yeah,
John, but at this point, she determined that they were not reasonable or necessary.
Now, the next two speakers had what I think is the same question. I'm going to try to answer it succinctly. Kay Walraven, and I'm sorry I didn't get the name of the subsequent woman who spoke, but the question was basically, would the town condemn Golden State Water Company and other investor-owned public utilities? Ladies and gentlemen, as the town attorney, I have only been asked to embark upon a public policy inquiry about the possible acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. At no time has my office received any direction with respect to the acquisition at the current time of any other investor-owned public utilities that may serve the citizens or taxpayers of the town of Apple Valley. That, of course, is a decision that is within the discretion of future town councils, but at no time has this council directed me to make inquiry into anything other than the possible acquisition of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. Jeff Kennard, a great question. I'm going to put this to my colleague Ken McVeigh. He wants to know, how can you believe the appraiser that the town retained? And I think raised a question that he was rather suspicious about the tour. Ken, can you address the tour that Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company arranged for us of the system?
Yes, this was a tour that was actually arranged by the Apple Valley Ranchos Company and its council, and one of the conditions of the tour was that we could take pictures, but we could not disclose them to the public. They considered that to be confidential information. If they want to show us the rest of the system, we are more than happy to see the rest of the system, and Mr. Brogan, who's in the audience, has my phone number. He can call me and set up an appointment so that we can go out and see the rest of the system. But they showed us what they were willing to show us.
Questions of belief are, I think, questions of opinion. But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to laying cards on the table, at least at this point, the town of Apple Valley has gone through an open and public and transparent process to retain a very expert valuation expert. It has made public the summary evaluation of the results of his evaluation. And I think the town council would welcome any appraisals or other formal valuations that might be made available to them that would help inform this decision. There was one final question from Kevin Phillips, I believe, a good question about layoffs and about bottling water. The town has no intention, to the best of my knowledge, of bottling water or being in the bottled water business. Its water needs to stay here. For those of you that want to know more about my opinion about Nestle and others bottling water in the state of California under the current conditions, I'd be glad to hold forth on that. But setting that aside, I think it was made clear during the presentation that it will be absolutely fundamental, should the town council go forward, to the success of this merger, if you will, or this proposed acquisition, that there be a partnership between the town and the employees of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. And as was made clear by Dennis Cron and by others, that is operationally an important linchpin of how this is going to be made a successful process. There are employees, key employees, as Dennis said, I believe, our friends and neighbors who can and will expect to be employed by the town of Apple Valley. That's always been the case here when we've had other mergers of public agencies, and it should be no different in the town council's opinion, as they've expressed it to me, should there be an acquisition of the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. And I believe that's it, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay, now we're going to move to council questions. Should either of my colleagues have any questions? Councilman Nassif?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stanton. Appreciate that. Yeah, this is, first I want to thank both the public for being here. We've thinned out a little bit, but I appreciate all the input. That's tremendously helpful to all of us to get that input from the public and also from the staff. You know, it was a fantastic presentation that I don't think I hardly believe you put this together in 2 weeks. We just noticed it and voted on it to put this meeting together 2 weeks ago, and to put this kind of information together was extremely helpful for myself, council, and hopefully for the public. So Appreciate all that, appreciate the input, and appreciate the putting this whole thing together for all of it. A lot of the questions, thank you, were asked and answered, so I whittled it down from 7 questions down to 3, if you'll allow me that. I had the water rights question too, that's come up several times in the public, myself, I've asked it, and I'm still, and I think it's been answered several times tonight, and I appreciate that. I did have a question about I want to clarify the infrastructure issue a little bit. I know there's been some concern that we are going to the PUC asking them to take out infrastructure that is vital to the community and the system. But as I understand it, a lot of that infrastructure that the town asked that the PUC take out of the rate base was future infrastructure, in particular expansion in North Apple Valley and tanks that aren't currently needed. That generally speaking, in a public ownership type of thing, again, it kind of gets back to a public ownership, municipal ownership can't charge more than what it costs to deliver the service. So in this case, if you're adding infrastructure for future development, you shouldn't be billing for that back to, I think the philosophy is not billing that back to current ratepayers for future development. Future development should pay for that infrastructure as they come on and build homes and as they come in and build businesses, maybe in North Apple Valley. Maybe, I don't know who to ask on that, Mr. Council, if who would answer that. I just want to clarify that was, because I think that's a concern of the public that we had Apple Valley Ranchos take out vital infrastructure, and I don't think that's the case.
I think it's a great question, Councilman Nassif. I think most of the folks that are aware of how municipally operated utilities work, a developer comes in, proposes a subdivision or an industrial building, and as part of that dialogue, towns and cities like ours have the ability under California law to essentially make new development pay for itself, and that's done in 2 ways. It's done by devising capacity charges, which are a recognition that a new user is buying into a system that you all, the ratepayers, paid for through your rates over the years. That becomes even more pristine in the case of Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company, because literally there weren't people buying into the system by and large, that it was the ratepayers financing a great many of the capital improvements. Secondly, in addition to capital capacity charges, Councilman Nassif, I know as you're aware, generally speaking, there are connection charges that are also charged to new development. And many of us read articles where people, and there were some good comments tonight about how new development is sometimes feeling burdened by capacity charges and connection charges. But that is fundamentally the way in which, under California law, towns like ours make new development pay for itself through capacity charges and connection charges. And those buy-ins to capital facilities and connections fees are not generally permitted under Proposition 218, and they're not permitted at all to be rate-based. You generally could not devise a theory that I know that would be legally defensible to fold back into your rates capacity or connection charges to fund the financial, the connections to the system, the extensions of the pipelines, the lift stations, the pump stations, and the additional storage that would be required for new development to take water from an existing water system. Water rights, Ken, do you want to weigh in on water rights one more time?
No, I was going to say, we won't wait. I think I got the water rights. So I was saying that was one of my questions that we can avoid in the interest of time. But the other I had 2 other questions. The other one kind of goes back to, and it was mentioned a couple times tonight, I think we've talked about it before, a recent municipality, and the name escapes me, but was, it was, had to do with the tiered water rates, and their intent was because of, they were justifying raising Tier 3 to a higher level in order to incentivize ratepayers to lower their usage in order to use less water. And this was a municipality, went to a court ruled that California, of course, as municipalities cannot charge more for water than what it costs to deliver. Therefore, they can't raise that tiered rate arbitrarily with that. San Juan Capistrano, thank you. And so that, that was a statement made. That's kind of the basis for what we've been talking about. And someone asked me the question, I don't know if it was asked tonight, how does that affect private water companies? We don't have a lot of private water companies. 85% of the water companies in California across the United States are municipally owned, publicly owned, and the private water companies, how do they affect the tiers? I know one instance, we talked a lot about rates increasing, but I also know that the amount of water that I've noticed over the years, I get into tier, I don't know how else to put it, but I get into tier 3 really quick now, where it used to take a while to get into tier 3. So essentially, even though tier 3 may not have, maybe it went up 68%, but now I'm hitting those rates a lot quicker than I did 10 years ago. So that actually adds to the increase in rates, because even if I add up what I paid before and what I have now, I'm paying more because I'm hitting that tier. A lot of times I tell you, if I take 2 showers a day, I'm into tier 3. So how does that affect the ruling by the court? How does that affect public water companies? And along with that, another question that was asked that wasn't talked about tonight was standby fees for fire protection on commercial businesses and homes. I don't think we charge for homes currently, but the state of California now requires that any home, it used to be 5,000 feet or over, have sprinkler system. And I know commercially, I have 4 businesses in the Victor Valley. My Apple Valley store pays substantially more for standby fees, and I'm not even sure if I pay them in Victorville or Sperry under municipal. So how does that affect them? And again, a standby fee is for water that I might use that I'm not using. Essentially, municipalities can't charge that because it's not really a service, it's just a fee. So, again, are there opportunities that are built into the system that are not afforded municipalities, i.e. tiered rates, and the PUC, I guess, is what regulates that, but how do they calculate in cost of service on standby fees and those kind of things that aren't being charged by municipalities? Long question, but,
Well, let me try and break it down real quickly.
Okay.
Councilman Nafis, the first question, as I understand it, is tiered rates and what are the implications of the San Juan Capistrano case with respect to the Court of Appeal ruling that, at least in that particular instance, the city of San Juan Capistrano did not justify its tiered rates. The Court of Appeal in that decision made it quite clear that was San Juan Capistrano's problem. It did not rule that tiered rates were illegal or unconstitutional. That case involved Proposition 218, so by its very holdings, Mayor, members of the Town Council, it's really only subject to municipal utilities and water districts, which are subject to Proposition 218. So it was a case that found you didn't do your due diligence under 218 to justify why those people in the very highest tiers should be paying more, because you did not appropriately demonstrate through the required evidence that 218 requires that they should have been paying more and that it was reasonably related to the cost of providing them water. Does that answer that question?
Well, how does that relate to public ownership?
That's a great question.
That's what I'm at.
Okay.
I understand the private,
so,
the public ownership, but how does that relate to the public?
I would invite anyone who wants to know about the 3 different appellate court decisions on Proposition 218 and tiered water rates to go to my website, bbklaw.com, because I have legal bulletins posted there on all of those decisions, and you're welcome to read them. They're available to the public without charge. But more importantly, with respect to the CPUC, Governor Brown, in his executive order, as was referred to earlier, Councilman Nassif, did direct the California Public Utilities Commission to begin the rulemaking process necessary to address his executive orders, including, if you will, the identification of urban water suppliers that were required to cut back. Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company has been identified as a water supplier that at this time has a proposed 36% water rate. At this point, the California Public Utilities Commission has not promulgated or initiated the rulemaking process, and we know that our friends at Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company are up there mixing it up with the governor and the State Water Resources Control Board, just like all of the other municipal water districts and cities are, and you're reading about them, making the case for why 36%, at least in our case, the case of our town, is not appropriate. And I know the Town Council is looking forward to a report and an update from Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company on their efforts to get that 36% cutback reduced. And there was one more question about fire.
Well, the question was about, and maybe this has to do with the PUC rating. How does fire standby fees, if you have your sprinkler system, and Art knows a lot about this, and maybe he could speak to it too, but we have a sprinkler system within a commercial building. You pay a standby fee in Apple Valley. I don't pay one in Victorville and Hesperia.
I don't know the answer to that question.
So I don't know how the PUC regulates it was brought to us at the last council meeting, and it kind of reminded me, so I went home and asked my wife I pulled out all the bills and tried to figure that out, but he called it a fire fee, but it's actually what they call a standby fee for potential water use. And that has an impact on businesses, when you're talking economics, when they're looking at their monthly rate in addition to what they use. What they don't use, there's a standby. So I don't know if the PUC looks at that, or if that's part of the application process that they charge a standby fee or don't, because apparently municipalities only do it if there's a cost involved at that level.
I guess we could just ask briefly, Jason Ackerman. Jason, do you have any indication that the CPUC, as part of its rulemaking procedure or its rate-making process, gets involved with fire standby charges?
It does work with standby fees, and standby fees are fees associated with providing service in the event that you need it. For example, if there is a fire event at a location and it requires the use of water to put it out, the utility at all times needs to have that water supply available to it to provide those services, because it's under an obligation to provide those services. And as such, it assesses a charge in the form of a standby fee to recover the cost associated with providing that service in the event that it is needed.
So then it's up to when it's under municipal control, they control that fee or not to charge the fee based on necessity, I guess.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. One last question, and it was brought to me before, a couple people again in the public regarding, and it was actually brought up regarding, I think Mr. Cron, regarding grants and why a private water company would not be interested in grants and sometimes funding because you can't build that into the rate base. And there was a question regarding Mojave Water Agency. I don't think anybody's here from Mojave Water Agency, but maybe Art would remember this. They had drilled and built a well costing something like $2.5 million to be used for the system here. I guess they've done that in the Victor Valley, and this well was supposed to be used by Apple Valley Ranchos, but they did not elect to put that into the system, and they elected to do other things, get water somewhere else. So we've got an expensive well sitting unused. I don't know if that's a rhetorical question or just if there's, nobody's been able to answer that question, why it's sitting there unused. And yeah, that's kind of, yeah. Well, we can't have, yeah. I guess that's the implication. That's what I guess that goes, again, it goes along with the grants and why they may not use grants. If they get a free well, we can't build it into the rate base. So that's just I don't know how else to, I guess it's not really a question, but it's a concern. I just hate to see that infrastructure the taxpayers paid sitting there unused. So I don't know if that's something, I guess the question would be, would we use that? Would we have the opportunity as a municipality, if we own the water system, to use that well? So I guess the answer would be yes. Art, I think you were on the Mojave Water Agency when that was built. But I'll let Art speak to that. So I think that's it. I had some comments later, but that's all I had in first questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Asif. Well, Councilman Bishop, it looks like you've got some questions maybe to answer and some questions to ask, so we'll turn it over.
Well, with regards to the well, when Mojave Water Agency was doing the RQ project, the majority of the wells were obviously on the Hesperia, Victorville, Adelanto, Baldy Mesa side of the river because they were really the biggest users. It was my request to really push to put, what are we doing for our side of the river? So a well was moved forward and it was offered to Apple Valley Ranchos. As a matter of fact, the design work that was done by the RBF, the Mojave Water Agency engineers, was not accepted by Apple Valley Ranchos Park Water down in Downey. And we had to pretty much redo a major redesign for them. And here we are 2 or 3 years later, and I'm sorry, I don't remember exact timing, and yet that well, which was designed to be given to out of Prop 50 money, which was a proposition by the people of the state of California voted for that was going to be given by Mojave Water Agency to Ranchos. It was well and pumping and pumps, pipe and pumps, is still unused. Now, it may later be used for wheeling water, which means you're taking water from one agency to another agency, because that was always the original intent of Mojave Water Agency, was to be able to get water through to many people in Apple Valley. But I can tell you this time, I can tell you now that it was always the intent of the Mojave Water Agency and Rancho to bring that into their system, and when the Carlisle group came, that changed. And that system is still sitting down there at the River by Just Ranch. So I hope that helps you. As far as the standby, I always had a real problem as the fire chief for standby, because I don't care what you say, if you're going to turn off the water in the street, you're turning off the domestic and you're turning off, you may have a different detector check. You may have a different valve system going into the fire sprinkler system, but you have not laid complete separate water lines that you can keep on guaranteeing you have the water. So, but the California Public Utility Commission, in all their wisdom, granted Apple Valley Ranchos Water many, many years ago the right to charge that fee. So I think you bring up one of the questions I had written down, but a really good point is our business people in Apple Valley, unlike other communities, have been paying that fee for years just for standby, just so, God forbid, there ever is a fire, and pray to God there never is, but in your business, that sprinkler system will go off. Now, in the state of California, family homes, your home, not your home, but new single, like down at Pulte, all the new homes there, all are mandated to have fire sprinklers. But I'm just curious, at what point will a private utility company go back to the PUC? Because please remember, that's the point of the PUC. The private agency can ask, and the PUC can grant. And that's the difference of local government versus PUC. So I hope, that it doesn't answer your question, but I hope at least it explains a little bit. I want to thank Ken and John for explaining water rights. I understand water rights really well, but this is a big issue on what they cost. But I concur with where we are today on water rights. They are a big thing, but so far I haven't seen Carlisle separate them in any time or any purpose. So if they're not separating from their purposes, and if they come back and they try to separate it for our purposes, are they doing what's best for the people who, by the way, gave them those water rights, because that's how the adjudication worked, or are they doing what's best for the corporation? My question was, one of my questions was on the 36%, and you may not be able to answer this, John, but I know you have some really smart people with you. It amazes me. Scott Weldy, the former general manager, a very good friend of Ranchos Water, would come over and over again to the Mojave Water Agency meetings and brag about more people in Apple Valley Ranchos Water, more people in Apple Valley were conserving and doing the castor grass than anywhere else in the high desert. So we, the people of the high desert, have been feeling really good about ourselves since 2006 when we started this program. We've been conserving, we've been conserving, we've been conserving. I can tell you I pulled out my lawns, I can't even begin to tell you how many people pull out their lawns. And yet somehow, because of the numbers presented by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company to the California Public Utility Commission, and please, I hope I'm
State Water Resources.
State Water Resources, we end up in a 36% category, and I cannot, in no way can I figure out that is as much as the people. I mean, my friends take their water out of their showers and their sinks, and they go out and they water their plants. Most people I know have cut out the vast majority of their lawns. Most people have gone from what I would call flood irrigation to drip irrigation. All the things you want to do. We all know water conservation is critical. How did we end up in Apple Valley on the worst possible list of 36% that you could end up with? And I'm not sure you can answer that question for me.
I can't, but it's a very good question for a town council member to put to the community.
Well, I guess I'm doing that right now. Another question I had is the sale of the company now, the sale of Apple Valley Ranchos by Carlisle for the Western Water for the three groups is $250 million plus $75 million in debt. Am I saying that correctly?
Can't hear you.
Marty,
250 are buying in net asset?
That's the purchase price.
Okay, I remember what the purchase price was 3 years ago. Would you let everybody in the audience know? Okay, what, if the debt now, if it was 111 million 3 years ago, for all three companies?
Correct.
I mean, I don't think these companies have grown a whole lot in the last 3 years, but maybe they have a little bit. Do we know what the debt was in 2011? Because we talk about the fact that the company has $75 million debt now, but I don't recall the debt being $75 million 3 years ago.
I don't know the number.
Okay. That's, I thought
that's right.
35. And
That's right, this is
I
Jason.
just would be curious of,
Wait,
what constitutes
Art,
that debt.
The attorney down here was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
answering.
It was $40 million in debt
Yeah.
in 2011.
Yes. That's, I remembered it. It's a considerable amount of, if you haven't done a lot of building construction in the last 3 years in these three companies, how in the world did our debt increase $35 million, almost half of what it was 3 years before? I really question that. I don't know if there's an answer, but I would love to hear it if there is. And then, just for the people of our community, just more of a comment than anything else, I think the fact that we, local government, live under the rules of the state of California, and especially specifically Prop 218, and yet as has been proven and spoken before, private water agencies do not. So we are transparent. We do answer to the people of Apple Valley. Our books are online and open 24/7. And if we're going to do something in the way of a rates, we have to abide by Proposition 218. And there's been many discussions in this council about moving forward with projects that would take a vote of the people by Proposition 218. So it's just one of the many reasons that, one of the many things that I think that the residents need to be looking at. I thought the Prop 218 was a really good discussion point earlier today, actually brought up by 4 of the different residents. So that's, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Councilman Bishop. Okay, I have startled me. That's a girl thing, you know. I have a couple real quick. CEQA was a question that was brought up, and can we, if there's no impact, can we shorten that timeline? Mr. Attorney or anyone who...
Alicia would be happy to.
Alicia, yes. Can we shorten that 8 to 12 months if there's no impact, or are there steps we have to go through?
Yes, there are steps we have to go through, and there are ways to streamline. So upon conducting the initial study, if the initial study shows that all impacts are less than significant or can be mitigated to a less than significant level, then legally the town could proceed with either a negative declaration if there are no impacts, or a mitigated negative declaration if there are impacts that require mitigation measures. So that the time frame, the 8 to 12 months, could be shaved down substantially. I would also like to mention that that 8 to 12 month estimate for the EIR is a very conservative estimate. I have seen EIRs completed in faster time frames, anywhere from 6 to 8 months. So that is another possibility. If in the event the initial study shows there are impacts that would be potentially significant and we have to proceed with an EIR, we could do it in a quicker time frame.
Okay, thank you. The other question is Yermo. I had a couple folks say, well, you're not going to look at Yermo, and I think I know the answer, but I'd like somebody on staff to answer that question. Do we have an interest in Yermo is my question. I know the answer, but I want our guest to hear.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I really think that would be a policy discussion of the Council. It wouldn't be staff recommendation. It would be a policy answer.
Just wanted that said once again, that we don't have an interest in Yermo. We're interested in Apple Valley. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. The last question I have is in the long run, the operation contingencies. Is there somebody that can help kind of crystallize that? And if someone answered that and I didn't hear it, forgive me, but what are our contingencies for whatever may befall us in the next few years? Because there are a lot of unknowns.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not sure with regard to addressing what our contingencies are is necessarily something I can address tonight. We've got a lot of work ahead of us should a decision be made here for the council to proceed, including maybe a less abbreviated tour of the Ranchos water system than we were provided on our last opportunity, and other more in-depth work that will be required in order to identify what the list of contingencies might even be. We are currently limited to the information that is voluntarily committed by Ranchos to the town, and that's very limited. So if you want to be more specific about a contingency relating to X, Y, or Z, maybe we might be able to address that, but there are many at this point.
And I appreciate that. It was more to crystallize the thought that we are aware of that possibility of the unknown, and we're not just running down a path without thinking of these sorts of things. So thank you very much, Mr. Cron. Okay, with that, we're going to move for a discussion of the council. If you have, I have a couple comments I'd like to make, and I know my colleagues probably do. One is that the 36% reduction is pretty shocking. As many have in our community, I took out my front yard last year. I have no grass left. It's quite lovely. I have shrubs and everything's on a bubbler and, decorative rock. In fact, I like it more than I thought I would. But now I'm looking at my backyard. I have a fair size amount of grass, but predominantly because of the drought. I feel guilty now watering grass. But it's also the cost factor. So I'm looking at taking out more. But many of you have done those steps, and we wonder how much more, how far can we go? We heard from a gentleman tonight who said, well, I'm on Social Security, and I just had to turn my water off. I have dirt. There are a lot of families, young families, that have dirt for their children to play on. That's very troubling. For me, it is. I think for all of us, but how far can we go? The town is certainly looking at the measures that we can take, because that's what we do. When we have mandates to meet or there's a drought, we are going to cut back wherever we can. But it's not as easy as it seems for any of us. We have a lot of thinking to do to decide the best path for your home, for our town. The bottled water, I don't know, that is kind of crazy, isn't it, when you think all this water leaving the state at a time like this, but that's another fight for someone else. And finally, I want to mention insults to staff. It was mentioned tonight that one of our employees wasn't responding to emails. I have to tell you that if I were called everything under the sun, I'll leave it at that, I wouldn't respond to emails either from someone who insulted me, called me a thief, an idiot, whatever. It's ridiculous, and you don't have to. And I'm saying that on behalf of our staff, because I believe that we have a wonderful staff that works in earnest for our town. And they didn't ask me to say this, but I felt that when somebody's insulted to that level, it's not playing fair. You folks were wonderful tonight. You all, whether you agree or disagree, it's okay. That's why we're here, to put all the cards on the table, to play our hands and see what's best for our community, not what's best for Barb or anyone else up here. It's what's best for all of us. So your opinions were well received and much appreciated. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Councilman Bishop, see if you have any more discussion or thoughts.
I have a friend who lives over off of Rincon, who about 8 years ago, Barb had grass in the front, grass in the back. Couldn't really afford it, but also wanted to do the conservative thing. Took out all the grass, front and back. And yet, he called me the other day. His bill today, 8 years higher, is higher than it was when he was watering the grass. So he really feels that he is being, here he's gone through all this work to conserve, not only for saving the water, but for also saving the money. And he's really having a real difficult time. To be honest with you, even staying in Apple Valley, because he says, no matter what I do, I just came to feed more. I would like to ask town staff real quick, the document that we received today, which I'm assuming probably was the BB&K copy of their PowerPoint. I hope this can go on. This was a great document, and I hope this would be available to the residents of our community via our town website, because I think you answered, I think our attorneys answered a vast majority of questions that the public was looking for tonight.
Thank you very much. I did want to point out that the town staff is not shy in retiring about contributing, and they made a major contribution
Excellent.
throughout the process. Both the town manager's office, Mr. Cron, and Mr. Puckett. Mr. Cron and Mr. Puckett were on the phone even as I drove up here today, suggesting editorial comment. Happy to be on their newspaper staff.
Okay, thank you so much.
And Councilman, it will be available. Tonight's meeting has been not only recorded, but all of the presentation has been captured in feed, and it will be posted on our website.
Did you hear that? Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilman Nassif.
Well, thank you again. And listening to a lot of the comments, and many of you know I'm a local business owner. In fact, this year, 40 years in business. So, and I'm 13 years now in the council. And so, this issue has been an issue for a long time, and watching it evolve, watching it change. Well, I've been here since '59, so I've been here since the inception of, pretty much the inception of Ranchos Water and Development Company and all the changes. So, I have strong opinions on this. We worked very hard. People come up, ask me about alternatives. This isn't just a flash in the pan thing. This is something we've been working on for a long time, and a lot of thought has gone in, and probably for myself more than others maybe. But I want to remind folks that we're talking about the ownership of the company and who should own it and operate it. So this is what I keep going back to myself, thinking about what's best for this community as far as ownership. There's still going to be employees here, and I'm hoping, and I know, and we've heard from a lot of the employees on many occasions, that they continue to work with this company under whatever ownership it is and provide the great service that they've been providing over the years. And they'll still be living in our community, still be spending money with the local businesses, and whatever ownership will be still spending money and still working with the local. That's not going to change, because we still have a local water company. That's not going to change. What I'm looking forward to is maybe local ownership of the local water company, which I think, in my opinion, would benefit. And there's a couple of reasons. I mentioned I'm in a business, and a lot of things have been said about government taking over business and private business, and I'm against that too as well. I'm a poster child for the free market. I've been doing this for so many years, but it's different. People have a choice. If you don't know, I own auto parts companies. So people have a choice where they buy auto parts. I was one of 16 independent ownerships back in 1988. Like I said, I've been in business for 40 years. I'm the only independent auto parts ownership in the Victor Valley now. I compete against corporations, so it's a different market. And I had to do things and make things work. But people can make that choice. You can choose where you buy your gas. You can choose where you buy your phones now. You can choose who handles your phone systems. You can make all those choices. But when it comes to something as essential to life as water, there's a reason 85% of water companies are owned by municipalities. You talk about companies, whether they do a good job or whether they don't. You heard from Mr. Yon, Bill Yon, Mayor Pro Tem for Big Bear Lake, and the issues of 50% leakage and the problems they had with a private water company back then. We know that in Missoula, Montana, they're having issues with the private water company not investing like they should, but still charging those rates, and they're having a 50% water leakage. So they have different issues than we do. We have a quality water system. We have quality company here. That's a different issue. Yermo was failed because it was a private water company that didn't reinvest. So you can point to issues both on public and private. So it's really up to the local ownership to do the right thing. And I would rather have the ability to come to my council. I'm not going to be here forever, for sure, and be able to come to my council, and if they're not doing the right thing, and I got leaks and those things are going on, I got somebody I can come talk to, and I think that's important. So I just want to make sure that, you know, and I know it's, as a lot of folks got up and talked about the philosophical differences, and I get that big time, but I also look at the PUC, how that's developed, and that's, in my personal opinion, it's an antiquated system that needs to be revised to truly look out for the public and not look out for the utility companies. And I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. A lot of changes have gone up there, but I don't see anything different today than what it was 5 years ago when they were, you know, when they were having hearings and everything regarding the PUC. And so that, I don't see that changing. If that doesn't change, I think you have local ownership is what would be beneficial. And that's, and the more I look into this, and the more I feel strongly about that. And it's tough because I live here with all the employees. I live here with the companies. They make choices on where they shop, and they've made those choices. And it's tough for me, you know, and it's tough for my employees to look at, you know, to work with folks in these communities. And there's other things that we make choices on this council that have affected us that live here and work here locally. So, you know, we don't make these decisions and move forward in vacuums. Again, I appreciate all the information that we're getting. We still need a lot more information moving forward. But I think it's, you know, I commend our council, commend our staff for not just, you know, for doing what they're doing the due diligence we need to do. But that's all the comments I have. I just want to make sure it gets that out. Maybe should I go ahead and make a motion and direction? Right. We have something else.
I want to mention that first, then you can. Okay. You sure can. We are at the point where we have three options tonight. And number one is to direct town staff and our town attorney to proceed with the preparation and completion of financial and other documents necessary for the town council to consider pursuing at its next council meeting the acquisition of the water system owned and operated by the Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company. Our second option is to ask for additional information. And our third option is to direct town staff to take no further action. Do we have any more discussion, or do we have a direction? We don't have to vote on this, just, gentlemen, what do you?
Scott?
Well, I guess you have to kind of make a motion to give direction. So I would, yeah, I guess it's a consensus, but I would support giving direction to staff and town attorney to proceed with the preparation and completion of financial and other legal documents necessary for the town council to consider pursuing at its next council meeting the acquisition of the water company owned and operated by Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company.
Okay, Councilman Bishop.
And I would concur. I know we're not seconding or voting, but.
No, but this is important that you know where we stand individually. I also would concur. I would like to direct staff to proceed. You've heard it twice. If we're all, I think that is our direction tonight. There's no need to vote. Correct?
Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, no, that time is over.
I'm with Liberty Utilities.
I can't hear you from here, but I'm sorry.
I'm with Liberty Utilities, and my question is going to be...
No, I can't, sir. The time is over for public comment. Forgive us, but I'm sorry. We're at the very end here. We don't need to vote. We have directed staff to move forward. Do we need any questions from staff?
No, that direction is very clear, Mayor and members of the Town Council. Thank you very much. I'll go speak to the gentleman from Liberty because I think he said it's for sale.
Okay, thank you very much.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, before we adjourn, I would like to ask that we close the meeting tonight in honor of William Emick, Kurt Emick's father, who recently passed away. And I'm so sorry, Kurt, Councilman Emick couldn't be here tonight because I know his passion for this process, but if we wouldn't mind.
I'm glad you reminded us. Thank you very much. It is important that you know why Councilman Emmett wasn't with us. And we appreciate all of you for hanging out with us this lengthy amount of time. Thank you so much. Drive careful going home. I called him Robert earlier. Thank you for the thank you.